I never thought my own son would humiliate me in front of an entire restaurant. But that night, Daniel looked across the dinner table with his wife beside him and his business friends watching and said, "Mom, you should be
You
grateful
need to sign
we
this
even
now,
let
Grandma.
you
It's
sit
for your
here."
own good.
Please, give me
My
more time to
fork
think about
froze
it.
in my
There is no
hand.
more time. Sign the
My
papers.
granddaughter Lily looked like she wanted to cry.
We do not
Then
air our
Daniel pushed a
grievances in
stack
public,
of papers toward
especially
me and
not
told me to
tonight.
sign. Before I could answer, a woman I had never seen before stood up from the next table and said, "I've heard sons talk like that before, usually right before they try to take everything." Before I tell you what happened next, please, like this video, subscribe. If stories like this touch your heart, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always feel less alone when I read your comments. Before that dinner, before my son looked at me like I was something he wanted to scrape off the bottom of his shoe, my life was quiet. Not perfect, not fancy, but quiet. My name is Rebecca Jenkins, and at 68 years old, I had learned how to make peace with silence. After my husband Thomas passed away, silence became almost like another person living in the house with me. It sat across from me at breakfast. It followed me down the hallway at night. It waited for me in the living room when the evening news ended and there was nothing left but the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock Thomas had hung on the wall 30 years earlier. Our house sat on a modest street in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. It was the kind of house people drove past without noticing. White siding that needed washing. Blue shutters Thomas painted himself one summer when his knees were already starting to ache. A narrow front porch with 2 rocking chairs, though only one had been used since he died. I never had much money, but that house was mine. Ours, really. Every corner held a piece of the life Thomas and I had built together. The kitchen table had a burn mark from the year Daniel tried to make me breakfast on Mother's Day and set a dish towel too close to the stove. The hallway still had a faint pencil mark where Thomas measured Daniel's height every birthday until he turned 14 and decided he was too grown for such things. In the bedroom, Thomas's old flannel shirt still hung on the back of the closet door. I told myself I kept it there because I had not gotten around to packing it away. But the truth was simpler than that. Some mornings, I pressed my face against it just to remember what being loved without conditions felt like. Daniel was our only child. From the moment I first held him, I thought my heart had stepped outside my body and learned how to breathe on its own. He was a beautiful baby, loud and demanding with fists that waved like he was already arguing with the world. Thomas used to laugh and say, "That boy is going to either run a company or run us both into the ground." Maybe he did both. When Daniel was little, we did not have the kind of life he later wanted people to believe he came from. Thomas worked long shifts at an auto parts warehouse. I managed the cafeteria at an elementary school and took in sewing jobs at night. I hemmed pants, repaired church dresses, replaced zippers, altered prom gowns, anything that brought in a little extra money. There were nights when my fingers cramped so badly I had to soak them in warm water before bed, but I never complained. I would look down the hallway at Daniel's bedroom door and remind myself why I was doing it. A child should not have to feel every crack in the floor beneath him. I wanted Daniel to have choices. That was the word I held onto, choices. I wanted him to choose college if he wanted it. Choose a better neighborhood. Choose a life where he would not count coins at the grocery store or pretend he was not hungry so his child could have seconds. So I sacrificed quietly. When Daniel needed new sneakers in middle school, I wore the same winter coat another year. When he made the varsity baseball team and needed equipment, Thomas sold his fishing boat, though he told Daniel it was because he did not use it much anymore. When college acceptance letters came, I cried in the bathroom where no one could see me, not because I was sad, but because I knew the money would not stretch far enough unless I stretched myself thinner. And I did. I worked breakfast shift at the school, came home, cooked dinner, then sewed until midnight. Thomas picked up overtime whenever he could. We paid tuition deposits, bought used textbooks, mailed care packages, and pretended not to notice when Daniel started sounding different on the phone. Sharper, impatient, like our questions embarrassed him. "Mom, I can't talk right now. Mom, nobody says it like that. Mom, please don't call the dorm phone unless it's important." I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. Sons pull away. A mother must learn to loosen her grip even when every finger aches from letting go. After college, Daniel went into real estate. At first, he sounded excited. He called to tell us about his first listing, his first commission, his first client who shook his hand and said he had a bright future. Thomas and I were so proud, we took him to a steakhouse we could barely afford. Daniel wore a new suit, and I remember thinking he looked like someone important. Later, when he wanted to buy his first house, he came to us with a folder of numbers and a smile that reminded me of the boy who used to ask for one more bedtime story. He said he only needed a little help with the down payment, just enough to get started. Thomas looked uncertain, but I squeezed his hand under the table. "He's our son," I whispered. "We gave him part of our savings, more than we should have, but I told myself that was what parents did. You gave your children roots, then you gave them wings, and sometimes you sold a piece of your own comfort to help them fly." After Thomas died, everything changed. Daniel came around often at first. He handled funeral arrangements, spoke to the insurance office, sorted through paperwork I could not bear to look at. I was grateful. I was so deep in grief that entire days passed like fogged glass. If Daniel put a paper in front of me and said, "Sign here, Mom, it's just to make things easier," I signed. If he said he would take care of something, I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. But months became years, and his visits grew shorter, then rarer. He still came by on holidays, usually with Megan and Lily, but even then, he seemed restless in my house. He would glance at the worn sofa, the old curtains, the framed family photos, as if everything around him belonged to a life he was trying to erase. Megan was always polite. That was the word people used for women like her. Polite. She brought flowers on Thanksgiving and expensive candles at Christmas gifts that somehow made my own home feel shabby. She smiled without warmth and said things like, "Rebecca, you really should think about updating this place," or, "At your age, wouldn't it be easier to move somewhere more manageable?" I would laugh softly and say, "This house has managed me just fine." She never laughed back. Lily was different. My sweet granddaughter. At 16, she had her father's dark eyes, but not his hardness. When she visited, she still hugged me like she meant it. She asked about Thomas. She helped me wash dishes, even when Megan told her not to bother. Sometimes, when Daniel and Megan were busy talking about work or money, or people I did not know, Lily would sit beside me and whisper, "I like it here, Grandma. It feels real." Those words stayed with me, because Daniel's world no longer felt real to me. It felt polished, performed, full of glass offices, dinner reservations, business cards, and conversations where people measured one another by cars, houses, vacations, and the names of restaurants they mentioned casually. Still, I loved him. That is the part people do not always understand. Love does not vanish just because someone hurts you slowly. A mother can notice the coldness in her son's voice and still remember the feverish child she held through the night. She can hear impatience and still hear echoes of, "Mommy, don't go." She can be ignored, corrected, dismissed, and still make excuses because the truth is too painful to hold. So when Daniel called me that Thursday afternoon, I answered with hope. "Mom," he said, his voice brighter than usual. "Are you free Saturday evening?" I looked at the calendar on the wall, though there was almost nothing written on it except a dental appointment and the church bake sale. I believe so, honey. Why I want you to come to dinner with us. My heart lifted in a way that embarrassed me. Dinner? Yes, somewhere nice. Megan and I are celebrating a big turning point for the family. I want you there. For the family. Those 3 words warmed me more than they should have. I sat down at the kitchen table, pressing the phone closer to my ear. That sounds lovely. Good, he said quickly. I'll text you the address. Wear something decent, okay? It's an upscale place. The warmth flickered just a little. Something decent. I looked down at my faded house sweater, then across the kitchen toward the laundry basket full of neatly folded towels. Of course, I said. I'll find something nice. After we hung up, I stayed at the table for a long time. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence felt different. Lighter. I imagined Daniel smiling when I walked in. I imagined Megan being kind. I imagined Lily running to hug me. Maybe Daniel had finally realized how far apart we had drifted. Maybe this dinner was his way of bringing me back into his life. Maybe I thought a mother's patience had finally been rewarded. I went upstairs and opened my closet. Most of my dresses were old church dresses and funeral dresses clothes bought for function rather than beauty. At the very back, I found a navy blue dress Thomas had always liked. It was simple with long sleeves and a modest neckline. I held it against myself in the mirror and tried to see what Thomas would have seen. Not an old woman, not a burden, just Rebecca. His Rebecca. I pressed the dress to my chest and smiled through tears. For the first time in a long while, I felt invited into my son's life, instead of tolerated at the edge of it. I did not know then that the dinner was not a celebration. I did not know my son had not invited me because he wanted me close. He invited me because he needed something from me. And by the time dessert menus reached the table, I would understand that the boy I had given everything to had learned how to look at his own mother and see only what he could still take. Saturday evening came with the kind of nervousness I had not felt in years. I spent nearly an hour getting ready, though there was not much to do. My hair had gone silver long ago, and no amount of brushing could make it fall the way it used to when Thomas was alive and would stand behind me in the mirror, pretending to be impatient while secretly watching me pin it up. I put on the navy blue dress he had always liked and fastened the little string of imitation pearls around my neck. They were not real pearls. Thomas had bought them from a department store during a Christmas sale, and he had apologized 3 times because he could not afford the real thing. I had worn them anyway proudly. That evening, as I looked at myself in the mirror, I touched the pearls and whispered, "Help me look nice tonight, Tom." The woman staring back at me looked older than I felt inside. Soft lines around the mouth, tiredness beneath the eyes, hands that had worked too many years and rested too little. But I also saw effort. I saw a mother who still wanted to be wanted by her son. That truth was more painful than I wanted to admit. Daniel had texted me the address of the restaurant that afternoon. It was in downtown Columbus, the kind of place with valet parking low golden lights and a menu without dollar signs next to the prices. I almost called him to ask if he was sure he wanted me there. Then I told myself not to be foolish. A son had invited his mother to dinner. That should not feel like a miracle. I drove my old Buick, slowly gripping the steering wheel with both hands. The city lights made the windshield shine, and for a moment, I felt like I was driving into someone else's life. When I pulled up to the restaurant, a young valet opened my door before I even knew what to do with my keys. "Good evening, ma'am," he said kindly. "Good evening," I answered, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. Inside, the restaurant smelled of butter wine, roasted garlic, and expensive perfume. The floor was dark wood, polished so brightly I could see the reflection of the chandeliers above. People spoke in low voices, laughing softly as if even their happiness had been trained to behave properly. I spotted Daniel before he saw me. He stood near a long table at the back, wearing a charcoal suit and a smile I recognized as his business smile. It was wide, confident, and polished, but it never quite reached his eyes. Megan sat beside him in a cream-colored dress, her blonde hair curled perfectly over one shoulder. Lily was there too, looking small between them despite being 16, her hands folded in her lap. But they were not alone. There were 4 other people at the table. A gray-haired man in a navy blazer, a younger woman with a sharp black bob and diamond earrings, a couple I had never seen before, both dressed like they belonged in glossy magazines. My steps slowed. This was not the family dinner I had imagined. Daniel noticed me then. For a second, something like irritation crossed his face before he replaced it with that bright, practiced smile. "Mom," he said, walking toward me, "you made it?" I wanted to hug him. I had imagined hugging him. But he leaned in only enough to kiss the air near my cheek, then stepped back and glanced at my dress. "That's nice," he said. One tiny pause can say more than a paragraph. Megan rose halfway from her chair. "Rebecca, hello. We're so glad you could come." Her voice was smooth, but her eyes moved quickly over my dress, my shoes, my purse. I had polished the shoes twice before leaving home, but they were still old. My purse was the same black one I had carried to church for years. Lily, bless her heart, jumped up and hugged me before anyone could stop her. "Grandma," she whispered into my shoulder, "you look beautiful." I held her a little longer than usual. "So do you, sweetheart." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, let me introduce you." He placed a hand lightly against my back, not affectionately, but as if guiding me into position. "This is Richard Cole. He's looking at partnering with us on the development project I mentioned. And this is Vanessa and Paul Whitman. They're interested in the investment side. And Karen Mills, Richard's associate." I smiled and shook hands, trying to remember names while my heart sank lower and lower. Development project, investment side, partnering. These were not family words. These were business words. Richard Cole gave me a firm handshake. "Daniel's told us a lot about his family." I looked at my son, surprised and pleased despite myself. "Has he?" Daniel laughed quickly. "Well, you know, just the basics." Just the basics. We sat down, and almost immediately I knew I did not belong at that table. Not because anyone said so at first, but because the space itself seemed to reject me. The waiter handed me a menu filled with words I could barely pronounce. Megan ordered sparkling water for the table without asking. Daniel recommended wine to Richard with a confidence that made him sound like a man who had never once eaten canned soup for dinner 3 nights in a row. When the waiter asked for my order, I hesitated. "The salmon is excellent," Daniel said quickly. I looked up. "Oh, I was thinking about the chicken." His smile tightened. "The salmon, Mom. Trust me." Everyone was looking at me. Such a small thing choosing dinner, and still I felt corrected like a child. "The salmon, then?" I said. Lily's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. At first, I tried to participate. When Richard asked how long I had lived in Ohio, I told him about the house Thomas and I had bought when Daniel was 5. I mentioned how Daniel used to ride his bicycle in circles around the driveway until Thomas drew a chalk racetrack for him. Daniel's fork paused midair. "Mom," he said softly, but there was warning in it. "They don't need the whole childhood documentary." A few people laughed politely. Heat rose into my face. "I'm sorry. I was just answering." "It's fine," Richard said, though he looked uncomfortable. Megan leaned forward. "Rebecca has so many sweet old stories. She remembers everything from decades ago." The way she said old made something inside me shrink. I tried to stay quiet after that. I listened while Daniel spoke about market timing, zoning, property values, and opportunity. He sounded intelligent. I will give him that. My son had always known how to speak when he wanted people to admire him. He described neighborhoods as if they were chess pieces. He spoke of unlocking value and underused assets, and something about those words made me uneasy, though I could not have explained why. At one point, Vanessa asked, "So, Daniel, did you grow up around real estate?" Daniel smiled. "Not exactly, but I learned early how important ownership is." I felt a small burst of pride. That's true. His father and I always taught him to work hard for what mattered. Daniel's jaw tightened. Megan took a sip of wine. Richard said, "That's a good lesson." I smiled, encouraged. Daniel worked very hard, but he was also blessed. His father used to take extra shifts, and I did sewing jobs at night. We wanted him to have Mom. This time, Daniel did not bother hiding the irritation. "Please." The table went still. I looked at him confused. "What?" He gave a short laugh, the kind meant to make cruelty look harmless. "You make it sound like we were living in a shack somewhere. I didn't mean we all had to work. That's life." He turned to the others. "My mother likes to dramatize things." Another polite laugh moved around the table, weaker than before. I stared down at my plate. The salmon I had not wanted sat untouched in front of me. My throat felt too tight to swallow. I could hear Thomas's voice in my memory, gentle but firm. "Rebecca, you don't have to make yourself small to keep someone else comfortable." But I had made myself small for so long that I did not know how to stop. Lily shifted beside me. "Dad, Grandma was just saying she was proud of you." Daniel's eyes snapped to her. "Lily, this is an adult conversation." She lowered her gaze. That hurt me more than what he had said to me. As the evening went on, Daniel became more animated, but not warmer. He performed. That was the only word for it. He laughed too loudly at Richard's comments. He touched Megan's hand at just the right moments. He referred to their family as grounded, loyal, and legacy-minded. Every time he said family, I felt a little more confused because he spoke as if family were an asset to display, not people to love. Then Karen Mills asked, "And Mrs. Jenkins, are you involved in Daniel's plans too?" Before I could answer, Daniel said, "In a way." I looked at him. He smiled at me then, and for the first time that night, the smile was not embarrassed or irritated. It was something worse, calculating. "Mom has always believed in supporting family," he said. Megan set her glass down very carefully. Richard nodded. "That's admirable." "Yes," Daniel said. "She understands that sometimes, to move forward, a family has to make smart decisions together." A cold feeling moved through me. "What decisions?" I asked softly. Daniel's hand went to the leather folder beside his chair. I had noticed it earlier, but assumed it held business papers for his meeting. Now he placed it on the table, resting one palm on top of it. "Nothing to worry about tonight," he said, still smiling. "Just a few things we'll go over after dinner." I looked from the folder to his face, and suddenly the restaurant felt too warm, too bright, too crowded. This was why I had been invited. Not to be loved, not to be celebrated, not because Daniel missed his mother. I had been brought there for a purpose. And judging by the way Megan refused to meet my eyes, she already knew exactly what that purpose was. Daniel kept his palm on that leather folder as if it were the centerpiece of the evening. The waiter returned to clear our plates, and I remember staring at the untouched salmon as it disappeared from in front of me. Such a strange thing to remember, but pain attaches itself to ordinary objects. A fork, a napkin, a water glass, a plate of food you were too humiliated to eat. Around the table, the conversation tried to continue, but something had shifted. Richard Cole glanced at the folder more than once. Karen Mills checked her phone, then looked at Daniel with careful interest. Vanessa and Paul Whitman whispered to each other while Megan sat perfectly still beside my son. Her posture straight, her face arranged into the kind of calm women wear when they already know a storm is coming. Lily's hand was still near mine under the table, but she had stopped squeezing. Her fingers felt cold. Daniel smiled at everyone. "I promise this won't take long." I looked at him. "What won't take long?" He opened the folder and slid out a stack of papers neatly clipped together. There were sticky tabs on the side, bright yellow ones marking places that needed signatures. My signature, I realized. Not his. Mine. "Just a few documents," he said, lowering his voice as though he were being considerate. Family housekeeping. The phrase sounded harmless, and maybe that was why it frightened me. "Family housekeeping," I repeated. Daniel gave a soft laugh, the kind he used when he wanted other people to think I was being difficult. "Mom, we talked about this." "No," I said slowly. "I don't believe we did." A thin line appeared between his eyebrows. "We discussed simplifying things, making sure everything is organized. At your age, it's smart to have a plan. At your age." Those 3 words landed like a hand pressing against the back of my neck. Megan leaned forward. "Rebecca, it's really just practical. Daniel has been trying to help you for a long time." I looked at her, then at the papers. "Help me with what?" Daniel turned the stack toward me and tapped the first yellow tab. "This gives me authority to manage certain things if needed. Banking, legal matters, property decisions. Nothing dramatic." I reached for the papers with fingers that did not feel like mine. The first page was full of formal language, the kind that made my eyes blur. But a few words stood out sharply. Power of attorney. I turned the next page. Property transfer authorization. Then another. Joint account access. My mouth went dry. "Daniel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why would you need access to my accounts?" His smile tightened. "Because you keep forgetting things." I blinked. "I do not keep forgetting things. Mom." He sighed and looked around the table, as if asking everyone to witness what he had to endure. "You forgot to pay the water bill last spring." "One bill," I said, "after I had the flu. And you misplaced your insurance letter. It was in the drawer where I always keep mail from the insurance company." "You see," he said, turning slightly toward Richard. "This is what I mean. She doesn't realize how much help she needs." The heat in my face turned cold. Richard looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps this is something better handled privately." "I agree," I said quickly. "I'd like to take these home and read them." Daniel's expression changed so fast that for 1 second I saw the truth beneath the polish. Anger, fear, impatience. "There's no reason to drag this out," he said. "I don't understand all of it." "You don't have to understand every line. That's why I'm here." Something inside me recoiled. All my life, I had trusted that sentence in one form or another. "That's why I'm here." "Let me handle it. Sign here, Mom. I'll take care of it." "Af. Sign here, Mom. I'll take care of it." After Thomas died, those words had sounded like kindness. Now in that restaurant under those golden lights, they sounded like a door locking. I would still like to read it to her. Thomas died. Those words had sounded like kindness. Now in that restaurant under those golden lights, they sounded like a door locking. I would still like to read it, I said. Daniel leaned back in his chair and laughed once, not with humor, but disbelief. "This is exactly what I was talking about." The table became silent. I folded my hands in my lap. "What were you talking about?" His eyes hardened. "How impossible you've become." Lily whispered, "Dad." Megan's hand moved under the table. I knew without seeing that she had touched Lily's knee, warning her. Daniel ignored her. I try to help you. I try to make sure you're taken care of. And every time you act suspicious, confused, or stubborn. I'm asking a question, I said. My voice was smaller than I wanted it to be. You're embarrassing me. The words struck me so plainly that I almost looked around to see if someone else had been hit. Daniel lowered his voice, but not enough. Everyone at the table heard him. So did the couple at the next table. Do you know how hard I have worked to build something respectable? Do you have any idea what it's like trying to move forward while you keep clinging to that old house like it's a shrine? My throat tightened. That house was your father's home. It's a pile of outdated wood sitting on value you don't even know how to use. I heard Lily draw in a sharp breath. I stared at my son, and for a moment, I did not see the man in the expensive suit. I saw the little boy who had once cried because his father would not let him sleep with a baseball glove under his pillow. I saw the teenager who begged me not to tell his friends I worked in a school cafeteria. I saw the college student who stopped inviting us to parent weekends because he said, "You and Dad wouldn't enjoy that crowd." Maybe he had been ashamed of us longer than I knew. Daniel continued, each word sharper than the last. You have no idea what opportunity looks like. You never did. You and Dad were satisfied with scraping by, but I'm not. I won't apologize for wanting more. I never asked you to apologize for wanting more. I said. I only asked to read what you want me to sign. His jaw clenched. Then he said it, the sentence I would hear in my sleep for weeks. Mom, you should be grateful we even let you sit here. No one moved. My hands went numb in my lap. For a second, I could not understand language. The words reached me, but my mind refused to accept that they had come from my child. My Daniel, the boy I had nursed through fever. The boy whose lunch money I had hidden in envelopes when we barely had enough gas in the car. The boy whose graduation photo still sat on my mantle because I had been so proud I could hardly breathe. Grateful that he let me sit there. Lily started crying silently. Not dramatically, not loudly, just tears slipping down her cheeks as she stared at her father like she had never seen him before. Megan looked away. Richard cleared his throat. Daniel, maybe? Daniel lifted a hand. No, it's fine. My mother needs to hear this. He turned back to me. You can't keep holding the family back because you're sentimental and afraid. Sign the papers. I looked down at the stack in front of me. The yellow tabs seemed to glow. My entire body wanted to disappear. I thought of standing up, but my knees felt weak. I thought of saying Thomas's name, but I was afraid my voice would break. I thought of telling Daniel that no amount of money could give a man dignity if he had to steal it from his mother. But I said nothing. That silence was not agreement. It was shock. Daniel mistook it for surrender. He took a pen from his jacket pocket and placed it beside my hand. Here, he said. First tab. I stared at the pen, and then a chair scraped against the floor behind us. Not loudly, but in that quiet restaurant, the sound cut through everything. A woman at the next table stood up. She was tall, though slightly stooped with age, with silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head and a deep green scarf draped over one shoulder. I had noticed her earlier only in passing. She had been dining alone, reading a small book between courses, looking like the kind of woman who belonged to herself completely. Now she stood with one hand resting on the back of her chair, her eyes fixed on Daniel. I've heard sons talk like that before, she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried. Daniel turned, startled. Excuse me. The woman did not flinch, usually right before they try to take everything. The silence that followed felt different from the silence before. The first silence had been shame. This one was judgment. Daniel's face darkened. This is a private family matter. No, the woman said. It became something else the moment you pushed legal documents in front of an elderly woman at a public dinner and pressured her to sign while insulting her capacity and character. My breath caught. Elderly woman. Legal documents. Pressured her to sign. The words made the scene sound clearer than it had felt from inside my own humiliation. Megan's lips parted. Richard sat back slowly. Karen's eyes sharpened with interest. Daniel scoffed. You don't know anything about this. The woman looked at the papers, then at me. Her expression softened just slightly. Ma'am, she said, do you have independent legal counsel? I swallowed. No. Have you read those documents fully? No. Do you understand what authority they would give your son? Daniel slammed his hand lightly on the table. That's enough. The woman turned back to him. Her face was composed, but her eyes had the weight of someone who had watched people lie under oath and learned to see the lie before it finished forming. I sat in family court for more than 30 years, she said. I know the difference between help and control. Something moved through the restaurant. A murmur, a shift. The entire table seemed to shrink around Daniel. He stared at her, and for the first time that night, my son looked uncertain. The woman reached into her purse, took out a small card, and placed it gently beside my untouched water glass. My name is Eleanor Whitaker, she said to me, and if I were you, I would not sign a single page tonight. The pen still lay beside my hand, but now, for the first time all evening, it no longer felt like a command. It felt like a choice. For a few seconds after Eleanor Whitaker spoke, no one at our table seemed to remember how to breathe. The restaurant did not become loud. There was no dramatic gasp, no movie-like moment where every person turned in perfect unison. It was worse than that. It was the kind of silence where people pretended not to listen while listening with every part of themselves. Daniel stared at Eleanor as if she had slapped him. This has nothing to do with you, he said. Eleanor did not raise her voice. She did not need to. It has everything to do with me if I am watching someone be pressured into signing documents she has not read. I'm her son. Yes, Eleanor said. That is what makes it more concerning. Daniel's face went red. Megan reached for her wine glass, then seemed to think better of it. Richard Cole looked down at the table, avoiding everyone's eyes. Karen Mills had stopped pretending this was simply an awkward family moment. She was watching Daniel carefully now, like a person watching a crack spread across expensive glass. I sat frozen, the pen still lying beside my hand. Eleanor's card remained near my water glass. I looked down at it and read the name printed in small black letters. Eleanor Whitaker, retired family court judge. My heart thudded once hard. Daniel saw me looking at the card. He reached across the table to pick it up, but Eleanor's voice stopped him. That card was given to your mother. My son's hand paused midair. I had never seen Daniel hesitate in front of strangers. He was always so quick, so polished, so certain of himself. But in that moment, he looked like a boy caught taking something from a drawer he had no right to open. Slowly, I picked up the card and closed my hand around it. It was such a small movement, but it changed something inside me. I had not signed. I had not obeyed. I had not apologized for embarrassing him. I simply held onto a card that someone had given me. Daniel's eyes moved from my hand to my face. Mom, he said, his voice low now. We are leaving. I looked at him confused. Leaving? Yes. He gathered the papers with sharp, angry movements and shoved them back into the folder. "You've made enough of a scene." "I didn't make a scene," I whispered. His mouth tightened. "Then don't make it worse." Lily stood as if she wanted to come to me, but Megan caught her wrist. "Lily," Megan said softly in that dangerous motherly tone that was not soft at all. "Get your coat." My granddaughter looked at me with wet eyes. I wanted to tell her it was all right, but it was not. Nothing about that night was all right. Daniel threw several bills onto the table, though I suspected he had not even checked the amount. Then he leaned toward Richard and forced a stiff smile. "I apologize. Family matters can be complicated." Richard did not smile back. "So can legal ones." The words landed quietly, but Daniel heard them. His jaw flexed. We walked out of the restaurant in a strange procession. Daniel first stiff-backed and furious. Megan beside him, one hand on Lily's shoulder like a guard. I followed a few steps behind, feeling older with every step. I could sense people watching, not openly perhaps, but with the side glances people give when they have witnessed something painful and do not know whether to pity you or pretend it never happened. The night air outside was cold against my face. The valet area glowed under a row of lights. Cars came and went. Laughter drifted from another group, leaving the restaurant people whose evening had not cracked open in public. Daniel turned on me the moment we reached the edge of the parking lot. "What were you thinking?" he snapped. I clutched my purse in front of me. I was thinking I wanted to read before signing. "No," he said. "You were thinking you'd let some strange old woman humiliate your family in front of people who matter. People who matter." I looked at him for a long moment. "And do I matter, Daniel?" His expression flickered, but only for a second. "Don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything." "You embarrassed me," he said. "You embarrassed Megan. You embarrassed yourself." Megan stepped closer. Her coat wrapped around her shoulders. "Rebecca Daniel has been under enormous pressure. You don't understand what this project means for us." "For us?" I asked. "For the family," she said. There it was again. That word, family, used like wrapping paper around something sharp. "I don't understand why my bank accounts and my house were in those papers," I said. Daniel exhaled through his nose. "Because you're not thinking long term. I am thinking about the home your father and I paid for, with 30 years of work. And what good is it doing anyone?" he said. "You sit in it alone, surrounded by old furniture and memories. Meanwhile, I'm trying to build something that could benefit all of us." "All of us," I repeated. "Yes, all of us." "Would it benefit me to sign over control of my property?" He looked away, and that was the first answer. My stomach tightened. Megan's voice grew colder. "Rebecca, no one is trying to hurt you. But you have to understand, choices have consequences." I turned to her. "What does that mean?" She glanced toward Lily, who stood a few feet away, crying silently, with her arms wrapped around herself. "It means," Megan said carefully, "that Daniel and I need to think about what is emotionally healthy for our daughter. If family visits become stressful or confusing, we may need to limit them for a while." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. "You would keep Lily from me." Megan's face did not change. "I'm saying cooperation would make things easier." Daniel did not stop her. He did not say, "Megan, that's enough." He simply stood there breathing hard, letting his wife turn my granddaughter into a bargaining chip. Lily broke then. "Mom, please don't," she said. "Grandma didn't do anything wrong." Megan turned on her. "Get in the car." But now, Lily looked at me, and the pain in her face nearly undid me. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her none of this was her fault. But I could see the way Daniel's hand hovered near the car door, impatient, controlling, ready to close it between us. So I did the only thing I could do. I smiled at her. Not because I was happy, not because I was fine, but because a child should not have to carry an old woman's terror on top of her own. "It's all right, sweetheart," I said softly. "Go with your parents." "It's not all right," Lily whispered. "No," I thought, "it is not." Daniel opened the back door, and Megan guided Lily inside. Then my son turned back to me. "You need to stop this," he said. "You need to go home, sleep on it, and tomorrow we'll talk like adults." "Adults don't pressure their mothers in restaurants," I said. The words surprised both of us. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Mom." A chill moved through me. "Is that a threat?" "It's advice." He got into his car before I could answer. Megan followed. Lily pressed her hand against the back window as they pulled away, and I lifted mine in return. Then the car disappeared into traffic, taking the only person at that dinner who had looked at me with love. I stood alone under the valet lights, my knees trembling. "Mrs. Jenkins," I turned. Eleanor Whitaker had come out of the restaurant. She had her coat, buttoned her purse over one arm, and that same calm expression on her face. But her eyes were gentle now. "I'm sorry," she said. I let out a sound that was almost a laugh. "For what?" "You didn't do it." "No," she said. "But I know what it costs a mother to see clearly what her child is willing to do." Those words nearly broke me. I looked down at the card still in my hand. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to know everything tonight," Eleanor said. "You only have to know one thing." "What?" "Do not sign anything." A tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it quickly, embarrassed. Eleanor did not look away. "Take the papers home if you have copies. Read them. Then call someone who represents you, not your son. I don't have a lawyer. I can refer you to one if you choose." She paused. "But first, promise me you won't let him rush you." The word promise reached a place in me that still remembered making vows beside Thomas. For better, for worse. In sickness and health. Promises used to feel sacred. Now I had to make one to protect myself from my own child. "I promise," I whispered. Eleanor nodded. "Good." I drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. The streets blurred through my tears. Every few minutes, Daniel's words returned so sharply, I flinched. "You should be grateful we even let you sit here." By the time I reached my house, I was shaking. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the dark hallway. The familiar smell of wood polish, old books, and lavender laundry soap met me like a tired embrace. For the first time all night, I let myself cry. Not delicate tears, not quiet, graceful sadness. I sobbed with one hand against the wall, my purse sliding off my shoulder, my body folding under the weight of what I had refused to see for too long. When the crying finally eased, I turned on the kitchen light. The room glowed yellow and warm. Thomas's chair sat empty at the table. I placed Eleanor's card beside the salt shaker, then opened my purse and took out the copies Daniel had forgotten I still had. Earlier, before the argument exploded, I had slipped a few pages into my purse after he told me to review the first tab. I did not even remember doing it. Maybe some part of me had been frightened before my heart could admit it. I spread the papers across the table. My eyes moved slowly over the words. Power of attorney. Authority over financial accounts. Real property decisions. Joint access. Transfer rights. Medical and residential recommendations. The more I read, the colder I became. This was not help. This was not family housekeeping. This was a map of how to remove me from my own life. One clause suggested Daniel could act on my behalf in matters relating to my residence. Another page referred to shared authority over certain accounts. A separate document included language about simplifying my living arrangements if independent maintenance of the property became impractical. Independent maintenance of the property. I knew what that meant. It meant my home, my kitchen, Thomas's chair, the hallway where Daniel's childhood height marks still hid beneath a fresh coat of paint. It meant everything could be taken politely legally with my own signature as permission. I sat at the table until the numbers on the stove clock changed past midnight. Then I reached for Eleanor Whitaker's card. My hand hovered over the phone. I was afraid to call. Afraid of what I would learn. Afraid that if I let the truth become real, I would never again be able to pretend Daniel was simply busy, stressed, misunderstood, or badly influenced by his wife. But pretending had nearly cost me everything. So I picked up the phone, and for the first time in years, instead of asking how I could keep my family together, I asked myself a different question. How do I keep myself safe? I did not call Eleanor that night. I wanted to. I sat at my kitchen table with her card between my fingers until the edges softened from how tightly I held it. I picked up the phone twice, then put it back down. Midnight became 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock became nearly 2. The house was quiet, except for the old refrigerator humming and the occasional creak from the hallway floorboards. I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. Daniel was under pressure. Daniel was ambitious. Daniel had always wanted to make something of himself. Maybe he had handled the situation badly. Maybe the papers were not as dangerous as they looked. Maybe I was too upset to understand them properly. A mother can build 1,000 excuses out of one broken hope, but every time I tried to soften what had happened, I heard his voice again. You should be grateful we even let you sit here. That sentence would not let me lie to myself. By morning, I had slept less than 2 hours. My eyes burned when I looked in the bathroom mirror. The navy blue dress hung over the chair in my bedroom, wrinkled now, no longer carrying the small hope I had placed in it. I folded it slowly and put it away, as if putting the dress back in the closet might also put the evening behind me. It did not. At 8:30, I made coffee I barely drank. At 9, I called Eleanor Whitaker. My hand shook so badly I dialed the wrong number the first time. When I finally got it right, I expected to leave a message. Instead, she answered on the third ring. Eleanor Whitaker speaking. I opened my mouth, but for a moment, nothing came out. Then I whispered, "This is Rebecca Jenkins, from the restaurant." Her voice changed instantly, not dramatically but warmly. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm glad you called." Those 5 words nearly made me cry. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said automatically. "You're not bothering me. I don't know what I'm doing." "That's all right," she replied. "Start with what you have in front of you." I looked at the papers spread across the table. Documents. The ones Daniel wanted me to sign. I read some of them last night, but I don't understand all the language. Do not try to interpret them alone, Eleanor said. And do not ask your son to explain them. I swallowed. Hell be angry. He is already angry, she said gently. The question is whether his anger controls your decisions. I stared at Thomas's empty chair. No one had said anything like that to me in years. Eleanor asked me to read the headings on each document. I did. Power of attorney, property transfer authorization, joint account access, residential planning agreement. Some pages had Daniel's name already typed into blanks. Other pages had spaces waiting for my signature, my initials, my consent. Eleanor stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Mrs. Jenkins, I cannot give you formal legal advice, not over the phone and not as your attorney, but I can tell you what I would tell any woman in your position. Before you sign anything, you need to know what has already been signed, what accounts your son can access, and whether any property documents have been altered. My stomach tightened. Altered? Checked, she said carefully. Let's use that word for now. She gave me a list. Bank records, credit reports, county property records, insurance forms. Any paperwork Daniel handled after Thomas died. She told me to gather everything and make copies. She told me not to confront Daniel until I had facts. And then she gave me the name of an attorney, Mark Reynolds, someone who had handled cases involving financial abuse of older adults. Financial abuse. I almost rejected the phrase the moment I heard it. No, I said softly. Daniel wouldn't. I mean, he's harsh sometimes, but he's my son. I know, Eleanor said. You don't understand. He was a good boy. I believe you. He brought me soup when I had pneumonia. He cried at his father's funeral. He used to call me every Sunday when he was in college. I believe that too. Her kindness made it harder, not easier. Then, how can both things be true? I asked. Eleanor's answer came quietly. People are rarely only one thing. After we hung up, I sat for several minutes without moving. Then I wiped my face, put on my coat, gathered my purse and the folder of documents, and drove to my bank. It was a small branch where I had gone for nearly 20 years. The same brick building, the same blue sign, the same parking lot where Thomas used to wait in the car while I deposited my cafeteria checks. I had never felt afraid walking into that bank before. That morning, I felt like I was entering a room where part of my life might be taken apart in front of me. A young teller greeted me, but I asked to speak with a manager. After a few minutes, a woman named Patricia came out and led me into a small glass-walled office. How can I help you today, Mrs. Jenkins? She asked. I folded and unfolded my hands in my lap. I need to review my accounts, all of them, and I need to know who has access. Patricia's expression remained professional, but I saw her attention sharpen. Of course, she asked for identification. I handed it over. She typed on her computer for several minutes. The clicking of the keys sounded louder than it should have. Then she frowned. What is it? I asked. She turned the monitor slightly, not enough for me to see details, but enough to show me she was looking carefully. There are authorized access notes on one of your savings accounts. My heart began to pound. What does that mean? It appears your son Daniel Jenkins was added as a limited authorized user for inquiry and transfer assistance. No, I said. I never added him. Patricia looked back at the screen. The authorization was processed approximately 11 months ago. 11 months. I searched my memory. 11 months ago, I had still been dealing with paperwork connected to Thomas's pension and life insurance. Daniel had come over several times with forms. He would sit at my kitchen table with his laptop open saying, "This is just routine, Mom," or "This will make things easier later." My hands went cold. Can you show me the form? I asked. Patricia hesitated. I can request the scanned copy. Please. While she worked, she printed recent statements. I read through them slowly, line by line. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Groceries, utilities, pharmacy, church donation. Then I saw charges I did not recognize, small amounts, not enough to scream theft, not enough that I would have noticed right away. $48.99, $62.50, $79, $105.30. They appeared every few weeks listed under service names that sounded vague and official. Consulting support, document management, property assessment fee, digital filing service. I don't know these, I said. Patricia leaned over to look. Those are electronic transfers. To whom? She read the details. Some are routed through a business account. What business? She typed again. I watched her face change. Jenkins Property Solutions, LLC, she said. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. That's Daniel's company, I whispered. Patricia became very still. Mrs. Jenkins, did you authorize these transfers? No. The word came out before fear could stop it. She printed more pages. The pattern stretched back months. Not enormous sums, but steady. Quiet. Careful. The kind of withdrawals a person might miss if she trusted too easily, if she was grieving, if she believed her son was helping her manage what her husband left behind. Then Patricia received the scanned authorization form. She printed it and placed it in front of me. There was my name, Rebecca Jenkins. The signature looked like mine at first glance. Similar slope, similar R. But I knew my hand. I knew the way I curved the J in Jenkins. I knew how my fingers trembled slightly when I signed after Thomas died, because grief had made even small movements unsteady. This signature was too smooth, too confident, too close, yet not right. I touched the page with one finger. I don't remember signing this. Patricia's voice was careful. It may be helpful to speak with an attorney. An attorney. The same word Eleanor had used. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the arm of the chair. Mrs. Jenkins, Patricia said, would you like us to place additional security verification on your accounts? I looked at her. Can you do that? Yes. We can require in-person verification for certain transactions and restrict external transfer permissions while this is reviewed. Yes, I said quickly. Please. Do whatever protects them. Protects them. My accounts, my savings, Thomas's overtime, my cafeteria checks, my sewing money, the small, careful pile of security I had built one tired dollar at a time. As Patricia filled out the forms, my phone buzzed in my purse. Daniel. I stared at his name on the screen until it stopped ringing. Then a text appeared. We need to talk. Don't let that woman get in your head. A second message followed. You're confused, Mom. Let me help before you make this worse. I turned the phone face down. For most of my life, those words would have worked. Confused. Help. Worse. He knew which buttons to press because he had grown up watching my heart from the inside. But that morning, sitting in the bank with proof spread across the desk, something began to harden beneath my grief. Not bitterness. Not hatred. Something steadier. Recognition. When I left the bank, I carried a folder of statements and copied forms against my chest. I sat in my Buick with the doors locked and finally let myself cry again. But the tears were different this time. They were not only from shame or heartbreak. They were from the terrible relief of finally seeing the shape of the thing that had been happening to me. My son had not simply insulted me at dinner. He had not simply lost his temper. Piece by piece, paper by paper, withdrawal by withdrawal, Daniel had been reaching into my life while calling it help. And now I had to find out how far his hand had already gone. By the time I drove home from the bank, Daniel had called 6 times. 6. Each missed call sat on my phone like a warning. He had also sent 4 text messages, each one a little less patient than the last. Mom, answer me. We need to clear this up. You're letting strangers scare you. Don't do anything stupid. That last one stayed on my screen while I sat in my driveway with the engine off. The folder of bank statements rested on the passenger seat. I kept looking from the phone to the folder, as if one might explain the other. The documents proved something was wrong, but my heart was still slow to accept who had done it. It is one thing to suspect your son has hurt you. It is another thing to hold the paper that suggests he planned it. I should have called Eleanor again. I should have called Mark Reynolds, the attorney whose name she had given me. I should have waited, gathered every fact, and protected myself quietly like Eleanor advised. But I was still a mother before I was a woman in danger. And mothers, even when wounded, still search for the child inside the man. So I did what Eleanor told me not to do. I drove to Daniel's house. He lived in a gated subdivision about 25 minutes away in a neighborhood where every lawn looked professionally trimmed and every front porch looked staged for a magazine. His house was large beige stone with black shutters and a 3-car garage. I remembered the day he and Megan moved in. Daniel had walked me through the rooms like a tour guide, pointing out high ceilings, custom cabinets, imported tile. I had told him it was beautiful because it was, but I had also noticed there were no family photos in the entryway. No picture of Thomas. No picture of Daniel as a boy. Not even one of me holding Lily as a baby. Everything looked expensive, but nothing looked rooted. I parked at the curb because the driveway was full. Daniel's SUV was there. Megan's white car, too. I sat for a moment, gripping the folder in my lap, then forced myself to walk to the door. Megan answered. For just a second, her polished face cracked. She looked surprised, then irritated, then pleasant again in that order. "Rebecca," she said, "we weren't expecting you." For just a second, her polished face cracked. She looked surprised, then irritated, then pleasant again in that order. "Rebecca," she said. "We weren't expecting you," she said. "We weren't expecting you. I need to speak with Daniel." Her eyes dropped to the folder in my hand. "This isn't a good time. It needs to be." Before she could answer, Daniel's voice came from inside. "Who is it?" Megan looked over her shoulder. "Your mother." There was a pause, not a long one, but long enough to hurt. Then Daniel appeared behind her barefoot, wearing a golf shirt, and the expression of a man inconvenienced in his own castle. "Mom," he said, "you should have called. I did not come for permission." His eyebrows lifted. It was a small reaction, but I saw it. He was not used to hearing that tone from me. Megan stepped aside reluctantly, and I walked in. Their foyer smelled like lemon polish and some expensive candle. Everything shone. A staircase curved up to the second floor. Somewhere above us, I heard a door close softly. Lily was home. That gave me courage. Daniel led me into the living room, where sunlight poured through tall windows onto furniture no one seemed to sit on. Megan stayed standing near the doorway, arms folded. I placed the folder on the glass coffee table. "I went to the bank," I said. Daniel's face changed. "Not much, but enough." "Why would you do that?" "Because I needed to know who had access to my accounts." He let out a tired sigh and rubbed his forehead. "Mom, I told you. I was helping." "You were added as an authorized user 11 months ago." "Yes, because you asked me to help manage things after Dad died." I stared at him. "I asked you to help me understand paperwork. I did not ask you to give yourself access to my money." His eyes hardened. "That's not what happened. There were transfers to your business." Megan looked quickly at Daniel. I saw it. Fear. Not confuse yet, Daniel. I saw it. Fear. Not confusion. Not surprise. Fear. Daniel noticed me notice. Small reimbursements, he said too quickly. "I paid for things on your behalf." "What things?" "Property-related things. Filing fees. Digit Al services. Maintenance consultations. On. Not surprise. Fear. Daniel noticed me notice. Small reimbursements, he said too quickly. I paid for things on your behalf. What things? Property-related things. Filing fees, digital services, maintenance consultations. I never hired any services. You wouldn't remember every little detail. The words were soft, but they struck like a slap. I remember enough, I said. Daniel laughed under his breath. Do you? The room went still. I looked at him. What is that supposed to mean? He sank onto the sofa, suddenly calm in a way that frightened me more than yelling. Mom, you've been forgetting things for a while. No, I haven't. You forgot the water bill. I was sick. You misplaced insurance papers. They were in my drawer. You called me twice last month, asking what day Lily's recital was. Because the time changed. Megan stepped in, then her voice gentle and poisonous. Rebecca, no one is attacking you. We're concerned. I turned to her. Concerned people do not threaten to keep a granddaughter away from her grandmother. Her cheeks colored. I was trying to protect Lily from stress. By using her as leverage, Daniel stood. Don't talk to my wife like that. Then tell your wife not to threaten me. His eyes flashed. You came into my home to accuse us, and now you're acting like the victim. I am the victim if my signature was used without my understanding. He froze. For the first time, I had said it plainly. Megan looked down. Daniel's voice dropped. Be careful. There it is again. I said. Be careful. Don't make it worse. Don't do anything stupid. Why do you keep talking to me like I'm your enemy? Because you're acting like one. The words hurt, but they did not shock me this time. Something had shifted inside me after the bank. Pain was still there, but it had room now. Room for anger. Room for clarity. I am your mother, I said. Daniel's mouth twisted. Then act like it. I stared at him. He went on pacing now. A mother helps her son when he is trying to build something. A mother doesn't run to banks and strangers and retired judges because she gets emotional over paperwork. Paperwork that could give you control over my house. Our house, he snapped. I blinked. What? His face flushed, but he kept going. Eventually, yes. Let's stop pretending. That house will come to me someday. I'm the only child. Why are we acting like I'm stealing something that is already part of the family? Because I am still alive, Daniel. The words rang through the room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then from upstairs, I heard the faint creak of a floorboard. Lily. Daniel heard it too. His head turned toward the ceiling. Lily, he shouted. No answer. Megan hurried toward the staircase. Lily, go back to your room. A small voice came from above. Grandma? My heart twisted. Lily stood at the top of the stairs in jeans and a school sweatshirt, her face pale, her eyes wide. She had been listening. Maybe not from the beginning, but enough. Daniel pointed upward. This is none of your business. She's my grandmother, Lily said, her voice trembling. Megan climbed halfway up the stairs. Sweetheart, adults are talking. No, Lily said, tears filling her eyes. Dad is yelling at Grandma. Daniel's expression turned cold. Go to your room, now. Lily looked at me, and I could see the terrible conflict in her young face. Love pulling one way, fear pulling the other. It's okay, I told her softly. Daniel turned on me. Stop involving my daughter. I didn't involve her. She heard you. Megan took Lily by the arm, not roughly but firmly enough that Lily flinched. Upstairs. Lily disappeared from view. That sound, her bedroom door closing, made my decision for me. I picked up the folder. "I'm leaving," I said. Daniel stepped closer. "You are not taking this to a lawyer." "Yes," I said. "I am." His face hardened into something I barely recognized. "Then understand what happens next." I waited. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "If you drag this family through some legal circus, I will not allow Lily to be caught in the middle. You won't see her until you come to your senses." My breath left me. There it was. The threat no longer hidden inside Megan's polished words. "You would punish her to control me. I would protect her from your instability." Instability. The word was chosen, placed, prepared. A sudden cold understanding moved through me. Daniel was not only trying to take control of my property, he was building a story. A story where I was forgetful, emotional, confused, influenced by strangers, unstable. And if enough people believed that story, maybe a court would. Maybe a doctor would. Maybe a bank would. Maybe everyone would. Megan would support it. She was already standing silently beside him. I looked at my son, and for the first time in my life, I felt afraid of him. Not physically. Daniel had never raised a hand to me. But there are ways to destroy a person without touching her. "I am not unstable," I said. Daniel's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. "Mom, you don't even realize how this looks." I moved toward the door. He followed. "That woman from the restaurant is using you." "No," I said, opening the front door. She saw me. I stepped outside before he could answer. The air was bright and cold. My hands shook as I walked down the driveway, but I did not look back until I reached my car. When I did, I saw Lily at an upstairs window. Her palm was pressed to the glass. I lifted my hand to her. She lifted hers back. Then the curtain moved, and she vanished. I got into my Buick and locked the doors. Daniel stood in the open doorway watching me like I had betrayed him. Maybe in his mind I had. Maybe the moment a mother refuses to be used, the child who used her calls it betrayal. I drove away with the folder on the seat beside me and a truth settling heavily in my chest. Daniel was not going to stop. And if I wanted to save my home, my dignity, and whatever remained of my family, I could no longer fight him as his mother. I would have to fight him as Rebecca Jenkins. A woman who still had a name, a house, a voice, and at last a reason to use it. The next morning, I called Eleanor again. This time, I did not wait until my hands stopped shaking because I was beginning to understand that courage does not always feel steady. Sometimes, courage is simply dialing the number while your heart is pounding. Sometimes, it is admitting out loud that the person hurting you is someone you still love. Eleanor answered in that same calm voice. "Rebecca," she said, as if we had known each other for years. "How are you this morning?" I almost said fine. It was an old habit, a woman's reflex, the word we use when the truth is too large to hand someone. But I was tired of making myself smaller than the truth. "I'm scared," I said. There was a brief silence, not empty, but respectful. "I know," she replied. I went to Daniel's house yesterday. Eleanor did not scold me. She did not say, "I told you not to confront him." She simply asked, "What happened?" So I told her. I told her about the bank records, the transfers to Daniel's business, the authorization form with the signature that looked almost like mine, but not quite. I told her about Megan standing in that perfect living room, calling concern what felt like control. I told her about Daniel saying the house would eventually come to him anyway. I told her about Lily at the top of the stairs, pale and frightened, listening to adults turn love into a weapon. When I finished, my throat hurt. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You need help from an attorney now." Not eventually. Now. I know. And you need emotional support too. I gave a tired laugh. Is that your polite way of saying I look like I'm falling apart? No, she said. It is my way of saying no one should have to stand alone while her family rewrites her life around her. Those words stayed with me. We agreed to meet later that afternoon at a small cafe near the county courthouse. Eleanor said she would bring the contact information for Mark Reynolds and help me make a list of documents to gather. I expected a businesslike meeting. Legal names, steps, forms, warnings. I did not expect what actually happened. The cafe was quiet when I arrived. It had dark green booths, little round tables, and a chalkboard menu written in careful cursive. Rain tapped lightly against the windows. I found Eleanor seated in the back, hands folded around a cup of tea. She looked less like the powerful woman from the restaurant and more like someone carrying old sorrow with dignity. She stood when she saw me. Rebecca. Eleanor. She hugged me gently, and I stiffened at first because I was not used to being held by someone who expected nothing from me. Then I let myself relax for 1 second. We sat across from each other. She had already ordered me coffee. I hope that's all right, she said. It is, thank you. For a while, we discussed practical things. She wrote down what I needed: bank statements, copies of the suspicious documents, property records, any forms Daniel had brought after Thomas died, insurance paperwork, tax filings, and a list of every account where Daniel might have helped me organize something. The list grew longer and longer. I stared at it, overwhelmed. I feel foolish. Why? Because I should have known. I should have questioned things sooner. Eleanor's face grew firm. No. That is exactly how this works. A person you trust uses your trust as the doorway. You did not fail because you loved your son. I looked down at my coffee. I keep remembering him as a little boy, I whispered. It makes it harder to see him clearly now. I understand that more than you might think. Something in her voice changed. I looked up. Eleanor turned her cup slowly between her hands. For the first time since I had met her, she seemed uncertain. Not weak, but as if she were standing before a door she had kept closed for many years. Rebecca, she said, there is something I need to tell you. My stomach tightened. About Daniel? No, about me. I waited. She looked toward the rain-streaked window. When I was 23 years old, I was not Eleanor Whitaker, retired judge. I was Eleanor Price, a terrified young woman with a cracked lip, $37 in her coat pocket, and nowhere safe to sleep. The calf noise seemed to fade. I had married too young, she continued. To a man everyone else found charming. He knew how to smile in public and terrify me in private. For 2 years, I believed if I became quieter, better, more obedient, he would stop hurting me. But people who want control do not stop because you become easier to control. Her eyes returned to mine. One rainy night, he went too far. I left while he was asleep. I took a small bag, my coat, and the cash I had hidden inside a flour canister. I walked to a bus station on the edge of town. I was soaked. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the ticket schedule. I forgot to breathe. A woman found me there, Eleanor said. She was young too, maybe in her late 20s. She was waiting for a bus with a little boy asleep against her shoulder. My heart gave a strange, quiet thump. She asked if I was all right. I lied and said yes, but my face gave me away. Eleanor smiled faintly, sadly. She did not push. She simply sat beside me and said, "You don't have to tell me anything, but you don't look safe." A memory flickered at the edge of my mind. Rain, a station bench, Daniel heavy and warm against my chest. Thomas out of town for warehouse training. A young woman with wet hair and a bruise she tried to hide with her collar. I gripped my cup. Eleanor kept speaking. That woman gave me her coat because mine was thin. She bought me a bus ticket with money she said she had saved for groceries. She sat with me until my bus came because she said no woman should have to wait alone when she was frightened. My eyes filled. No, I whispered. Eleanor reached into her purse and took out a folded, aging piece of paper protected inside a plastic sleeve. She slid it across the table. It was a receipt. A bus ticket receipt dated more than 40 years ago. On the back in handwriting, I recognized with a shock that went through my whole body were the words, "You deserve to be safe." Rebecca. I covered my mouth. Eleanor's eyes shone. You wrote that for me. I stared at the receipt as if it had come from another lifetime. The memory opened fully now. I had been 27. Daniel had been almost 3. Thomas was away for 3 nights, and I had taken Daniel by bus to visit my sister. On the way home during a storm, we had stopped at a station to transfer. That was where I saw the young woman, bruised, shivering, trying not to cry. I remembered giving her my coat. I remembered buying the ticket. I remembered Thomas later asking why I came home without the grocery money, and I had told him only that someone needed it more than we did. He had kissed my forehead and said, "That sounds like you." But life had moved on. Bills, work, motherhood, school lunches, sewing hems, Thomas's illness, Daniel's needs. The memory had faded into all the other small acts a woman does, without expecting them to become important. You were that woman, I said. Eleanor nodded. I was, a sob rose in my throat. I didn't remember. I know, she said gently. I did. I shook my head, crying openly now in the back of the calf. I only gave you a coat and a ticket. No. Eleanor said, her voice trembling for the first time. You gave me proof that I was still a person. That night I got on that bus because you looked at me like my life mattered. I went to a shelter. Later I finished school. Then law school. Then I spent decades in family court trying to recognize the women who were too frightened to say what was happening. She touched the receipt. I kept this in my desk through every job I ever had. On the hardest days, I read your words. I could not speak. All those years I had thought my life was small. Cafeteria shifts, sewing jobs, bills paid late, groceries stretched thin, a plain house on a plain street. I had thought my kindness disappeared into the world without leaving marks. But here was Eleanor sitting across from me, alive and strong and brilliant, carrying one of those marks in her purse. I don't know what to say, I whispered. You don't have to say anything. Eleanor smiled through tears. At the restaurant, when I heard your son speaking to you that way, I recognized the pattern before I recognized you. Control dressed as concern. Pressure dressed as family duty. Humiliation used to make a woman doubt herself. I have seen it too many times. And then I heard your name, Rebecca Jenkins. Her smile softened, and I remembered the woman at the bus station. I pressed both hands over my heart. For the first time since the dinner, something other than fear moved through me. Not joy exactly, not relief, something deeper. A reminder that I was more than Daniel's mother, more than Thomas's widow, more than an old woman with papers spread across her kitchen table. I was Rebecca. I had mattered before anyone tried to measure my worth in property lines and bank balances. Eleanor folded the receipt carefully and returned it to her purse. You helped me, When I had no power, she said. Now let me help you while you still have yours. I wiped my face with a napkin and nodded. Outside, the rain continued falling, but the world looked different through the calf window. Not safe yet, not simple, but no longer empty. Daniel had made me feel alone at that dinner table. Eleanor called Mark Reynolds before we left the calf. She did not make it sound dramatic. That was one of the things I began to appreciate about her. She did not feed my fear, but she did not soften reality either. She spoke in a low, steady voice, explaining that she had a woman sitting with her who needed an urgent consultation about possible financial exploitation, questionable account access, and documents involving power of attorney and property control. Possible financial exploitation. The phrase sounded like something that happened to people on evening news segments, not to a mother sitting in a calf with cold coffee and mascara smudged under her eyes. But Mark Reynolds agreed to see me the next morning. His office was in a modest brick building near downtown Columbus, not far from the courthouse. There were no marble floors or glittering views, just a clean waiting room, a receptionist with kind eyes, and framed certificates on the wall. Somehow, that comforted me. I did not need someone flashy. I needed someone serious. Eleanor came with me, but she was careful from the beginning. "I'm here as your friend," she said before we walked in. "Not as your lawyer, not as a judge, not as someone making decisions for you." I nodded, though I was not sure I fully understood why she made that so clear. Mark Reynolds explained it 5 minutes later. He was in his late 50s, with thinning brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the tired but attentive face of someone who had spent years listening to families fall apart behind closed doors. He shook my hand gently, then Eleanor's. "I know Judge Whitaker by reputation," he said. "Retired?" Eleanor corrected softly. He smiled. "Retired judges are still judges in everyone's mind." Then he turned to me. "Mrs. Jenkins, I want to be clear. My job is to represent you, not your son, not your family as a unit. You." That word landed heavily. You. So many people had used family as if it were one body, one wallet, one decision. Mark separated me from the blur. I placed everything I had on his desk, the copies of the restaurant documents, the bank statements, the authorization form, Daniel's text messages, and the notes Eleanor had helped me organize. Mark reviewed them slowly. He did not gasp. He did not shake his head theatrically. He read like a man assembling a map. After nearly 20 minutes, he removed his glasses and looked at me. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, "I cannot conclude everything today, but I can tell you this is serious." My hands tightened around my purse strap. How serious? Serious enough that you should not sign anything your son gives you. Serious enough that we should secure your accounts, check your property records, and send preservation notices so documents and communications are not conveniently lost. "Preservation notices?" I asked. "A formal request that relevant records be kept intact." I nodded, pretending I understood more than I did. Mark's voice softened. "I also want to explain something. Financial abuse does not always begin with someone emptying an account in one day. Often it starts smaller. Access, influence, confusion. A signature here, a reimbursement there. The person doing it usually frames it as help." My throat tightened. Help. Daniel's favorite word lately. Mark continued. "And when the victim begins to question it, the person may shift to undermining her credibility, saying she is forgetful, emotional, easily influenced, no longer capable." I looked at Eleanor. She looked back with sad recognition. "That's exactly what Daniel said," I whispered. Mark nodded. "I expected so." That frightened me more than if he had been surprised. He asked about Daniel's business. I told him what I knew, which was not much. Jenkins Property Solutions, real estate development, renovations, small investment deals. Daniel spoke often in polished phrases that made his work sound larger than life, but I had never seen the numbers behind it. Mark asked whether Daniel had recently seemed stressed about money. I remembered phone calls cut short. Megan's tense smile. Daniel snapping at Lily for ordering something unnecessary at a family lunch. His insistence that the dinner represented a turning point. His anger when I refused to sign. Yes, I said, but he never admitted it. Mark turned to his computer and began searching public records. He explained what he was doing as he worked. Business filings, property liens, court dockets, county records. Some of it was public information. Some would require formal requests or authorization. After a few minutes, his face became still. What is it? I asked. There are several filings connected to a failed development outside Dayton, he said. Your son's company appears to have been involved. Failed. The project stalled. There are contractor disputes and at least one pending claim for unpaid work. I stared at him. Daniel had told me that project was delayed by market timing. He had made it sound like strategy, not trouble. Mark kept searching. There may also be private debt. I can't confirm that from here. But based on these records, I would say your son has financial pressure. Eleanor asked quietly. Enough pressure to seek collateral. Mark looked at the documents Daniel had tried to make me sign. That would be my concern. Collateral. The word made my stomach twist. You mean my house? I said. Mark did not look away. Yes. For a moment, the room blurred. I saw my front porch, Thomas painting the shutters, Daniel riding his little bike in circles, Lily sitting at my kitchen table eating cinnamon toast. My life reduced to collateral. Mark pulled one document closer. This property transfer authorization is written broadly. Very broadly. If paired with power of attorney and account access, it could allow your son to act in ways that may be difficult to unwind quickly. But he said it was family housekeeping. Mark's expression tightened not in anger at me, but at the phrase. That is not what I would call it, He asked about the dinner in detail. Who was there? What was said? Were the investors present when Daniel pushed the papers toward me? Had anyone heard him pressure me? Did he mention urgency? Did he imply I was forgetful in front of them? I answered as best I could. Each question made the dinner look less like an emotional explosion and more like a setup. When I finished, Mark leaned back. Mrs. Jenkins, I think your son invited you there for a reason. To humiliate me, to pressure you, he said. Humiliation may have been part of the pressure. If you had signed at that table in front of business associates, he could later claim you understood the matter, participated willingly, and consented in a public setting. My skin went cold. Eleanor's voice was quiet. Social pressure as coercion. Exactly, Mark said. I thought back to Daniel's business smile, Megan's careful silence, the leather folder, the yellow tabs, the way Daniel had said it would not take long, the way he told me to trust him, the way he placed the pen beside my hand as if the decision had already been made. It had not been sudden. It had been planned. My hand went to my chest. He knew I wouldn't want to embarrass him. Mark's face softened. He may have counted on it. Those words hurt more than I expected, because he would have been right. Before Eleanor stood up, I had been inches away from signing just to make the shame stop. Mark made several recommendations. First, he wanted me to maintain the new protections at the bank and add similar protections anywhere else I had accounts. Second, he wanted to review the property records for my home immediately. Third, he advised me not to communicate with Daniel about legal or financial matters except in writing. Fourth, he wanted copies of any documents Daniel had handled after Thomas died. Then he asked the question I dreaded. Do you believe your son may try to have you declared incapable of managing your own affairs? I closed my eyes. I remembered Daniel's voice in his living room. You're unstable. You don't even realize how this looks. I opened my eyes again. Yes. The word felt like betrayal, but it also felt like survival. Mark nodded. Then we get ahead of that. We document your capacity, your independence, your financial history, and the pattern of his conduct. My capacity? I asked. Your ability to make your own decisions, the idea that I might have to prove I was still myself, made me want to scream. Instead, I sat very still. Eleanor reached across the space between our chairs, not taking my hand, just placing hers palm up on the armrest between us. An offer, not pressure. I took it. Mark looked at both of us, then said, There is one more thing. Your granddaughter may know more than she has said. I stiffened. I don't want Lily dragged into this. I understand. But if she witnessed threats or heard conversations that may matter, we would handle it carefully, especially because she is a minor. No, I said at first. She's just a child. But even as I said it, I saw Lily at the upstairs window, her hand against the glass, her face pale with fear and loyalty. Mark did not push. For now, we protect you. We gather facts. We move step by step, step by step. That was all I could manage. When I left his office, I had a plan, a list, and an attorney who believed me. But belief did not erase the ache. As Eleanor walked me to my car, I stopped on the sidewalk and looked up at the gray Ohio sky. My son set a trap for me, I said. Eleanor stood beside me. Yes. He smiled while he did it. She did not answer. She did not need to. I thought of the restaurant table again. The polished silverware, the soft lights, Daniel's hand on the folder, my own desperate wish that the evening meant he loved me. That was the cruelest part. He had not lured me with fear. He had lured me with hope. And now that I understood the trap, I had to decide whether I was brave enough to step out of it fully, even if doing so meant watching my son's mask fall in front of everyone. 3 days after I met with Mark Reynolds, Lily called me. It was not from her regular number. I knew that before I even answered because the number on the screen was unfamiliar, a local area code, but not one saved in my contacts. I almost ignored it. By then, every ring of my phone made my shoulders tense. Daniel had stopped calling as often, but his silence felt no less threatening. It felt like the quiet before someone decides what weapon to use next. Still, something made me answer. Hello? For a moment, there was only breathing. Then a small, trembling voice whispered, Grandma. I sat up straight in my chair. Lily. Please don't say my name too loud. My heart clenched. I looked around my empty kitchen as if Daniel could somehow hear through the walls. Sweetheart, are you safe? I'm at school. I borrowed my friend's phone. I told her I had to call you. I closed my eyes for 1 second, relieved and terrified at the same time. What's wrong? I need to see you. The words came out quickly like she had been holding them in for days. Did something happen? She sniffed. Yes. No. I don't know. I have something. Something you need. My hand tightened around the phone. What do you mean I can't talk here? Can you meet me at the public library after school? The one near Maple Street? I told Mom I'm working on a history project with Ava. Lily, if this puts you in trouble, Grandma, please. Her voice broke. I'm scared. That was all it took. I wrote down the time with a shaking hand, though I knew I would not forget it. After we hung up, I sat motionless at the kitchen table, the phone still pressed to my palm. A part of me wanted to call Mark immediately. Another part wanted to call Daniel and demand to know what he had done to frighten his daughter. But I remembered Mark's warning. No emotional confrontations. No giving Daniel the chance to prepare his next lie. Facts first, safety first. So I called Eleanor. She listened quietly, then said, "Meet Lily in a public place. Do not pressure her. Do not promise what you cannot control. And after you speak with her, call Mark. I don't want her dragged into this." So I called Eleanor. She listened quietly, then said, "Meet Lily in a public place. Do not pressure her. Do not promise what you cannot control. And after you speak with her, call Mark. I don't want her dragged into this," I said. "I know. She's only 16. "I know," Eleanor repeated gently. "But children often see more than adults want them to see." That sentence stayed with me all afternoon. At 3:30, I parked outside the Maple Street Public Library. It was a brick building with wide windows and a row of bare trees lining the sidewalk. I had taken Lily there when she was little, back when she still liked picture books about animals, and would sit cross-legged on the carpet while I read to her. Back then, she believed every story ended with someone safe at home. I wished I could still give her that kind of ending. I found her in the back, near the young adult section, tucked into a corner table, with her backpack on the chair beside her. She looked younger than 16 that day. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, and she wore a gray hoodie that nearly swallowed her. When she saw me, she stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. I opened my arms. She came into them like she had been holding herself together with thread. "Oh, Grandma," she whispered. I held her carefully, trying not to cry. "I'm here, sweetheart." She shook against me. Dad would be so mad if he knew. Then, well, be careful. We sat down at the corner table. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but I forced myself to wait. Lily stared at her hands for a long time. Finally, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a small flash drive attached to a pink keychain shaped like a strawberry. I copied something she said. "What is it? A recording?" The words seemed to freeze between us. She looked up, eyes wet. After the dinner. That night. Mom and Dad were arguing in the kitchen. I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs because I thought maybe Dad would apologize to Mom, or maybe Mom would tell him he was wrong. She swallowed hard. But they weren't talking about apologizing. I felt cold spread through my chest. What were they saying? Lily pushed the flash drive toward me, then pulled it back as if afraid of what giving it away would mean. "I shouldn't have recorded them. I know that, but Dad sounded so angry, and then he said your name, and I thought if something happened, no one would believe you." My eyes filled. "Oh, Lily." I used my phone. I left it recording from the hallway. "Sweetheart, you should not have had to do that." "I know." Her mouth trembled. "I heard Dad say if you didn't sign, he would make you look confused. He said people already expect old women to forget things. He said he could talk to your doctor or at least make it look like he was concerned. He said that retired judge woman was a problem because she made you brave." My breath caught. Made you brave. Even Daniel had seen it. Lily wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Mom told him to lower his voice. She said, "What if Lily hears, and Dad said I was a child and wouldn't understand?" Her face hardened in a way I had never seen before. But I did understand, Grandma. I reached for her hand. "I'm so sorry." "There's more," she whispered. I did not want more. I already felt as if the room were tilting around me. But Lily continued. "Dad said the investors were getting nervous. He said he had promised them the house would be available as security soon. Mom asked what would happen if you refused, and he said, She stopped. I squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to say it if you can't. She shook her head. No, you need to know. Her voice dropped so low I had to lean closer. He said, then he'll make sure everyone understands she can't manage on her own anymore. For a moment, I could not speak. The library around us continued as if nothing had happened. Pages turned. A printer hummed. Someone whispered near the reference desk. Outside, cars passed on Maple Street. Ordinary life moved forward while my family's hidden cruelty sat on the table between my granddaughter and me. Lily pushed the flash drive toward me again. I copied it before Dad took my phone last night. He took your phone. He said I was being disrespectful. I think he knows I heard something, but he doesn't know about the copy. She looked terrified. Grandma, if he finds out I took both her hands in mine. Listen to me. You are not responsible for fixing what adults have broken, but I don't want him to hurt you. I know, and what you did may help, but your safety matters too. I hate this, she said, and then she started crying in the way children cry when they have tried too hard to be grown. I hate that I'm scared of my own dad. I hate that Mom just stands there. I hate that everyone keeps acting like you're the problem when you're the only one who ever made me feel safe. Those words broke something open in me. I moved around the table and wrapped my arms around her again. You are loved, I whispered. No matter what happens between the adults, you are loved. But what if Dad never forgives me? I closed my eyes. There it was. The burden Daniel had placed on his own daughter. Loyalty twisted into fear. Truth made to feel like betrayal. Lily, I said, carefully pulling back enough to look at her, telling the truth about harm is not the same as causing harm. She stared at me. Your father made choices. Your mother made choices. I made choices too when I trusted too long and stayed quiet too often. But this is not your fault. She nodded, but I could tell she did not fully believe it yet. Maybe that kind of belief takes time. I placed the flash drive in my purse, then immediately felt the weight of it. It was so small. Plastic and metal. A little pink strawberry dangling from the end. Yet it might hold the proof that Daniel had not merely been careless or stressed or misunderstood. It might hold proof that he intended to make the world doubt my mind. I have to give this to my attorney, I said. Lily's face went pale. Will I have to go to court? I don't know, I said honestly, but I promise you this. I will do everything I can to protect you. She looked down. Dad always says promises don't mean anything unless people can prove them. That sounds like your father. A tiny, sad smile crossed her face. Then she glanced at the clock. I have to go soon. Mom is picking me up at Ava's house. Does Ava know? Only that I'm upset? Good. Keep it that way for now. She nodded. Before she left, she hugged me again at the library entrance. This time, she whispered, Please, don't let him take your house. I held her tighter. I won't. I watched her walk down the sidewalk, backpack over one shoulder, looking both ways before crossing the street like the careful girl she had always been. A few minutes later, a blue sedan pulled up near the corner. Lily got in. I recognized Megan behind the wheel. For one breath, Megan looked toward the library. I stepped back behind the brick column. I do not know if she saw me. When they drove away, I sat in my car and called Mark Reynolds. He answered on the second ring. I have something, I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears. Not stronger exactly, but clearer. What kind of something, Mark asked. A recording. From Lily. There was a pause. Then Mark said, "Do not play it for anyone else. Bring it to my office." I looked at the library doors, then at the road where Lily had disappeared. "She's afraid," I said. "I understand." "No," I whispered. "I don't think any of us understood how far Daniel would go." I placed my hand over my purse, feeling the outline of the flash drive through the leather. The story Daniel had tried to build around me was beginning to crack. And the smallest person in the room, the one everyone thought would stay silent, had just handed me the loudest truth. Mark listened to Lily's recording in his office with the door closed. I sat across from him, my hands folded so tightly in my lap that my knuckles ached. Eleanor sat beside me silent, giving me the kind of presence that did not crowd me. The little flash drive lay on Mark's desk after he transferred the audio to his secure computer, the pink strawberry keychain looking painfully innocent beside legal pads and case folders. When Daniel's voice came through the speakers, I closed my eyes. At first, the audio was muffled. A cabinet closing. Megan saying something I could not make out. Then Daniel's voice sharp and low. "She embarrassed me in front of everyone." Megan answered, "You embarrassed yourself when you lost control." "I did not lose control. She was supposed to sign." My breath caught. Mark paused the recording and looked at me. "Do you want to continue?" I nodded, though every part of me wanted to run from the room. He pressed play. Daniel's voice returned. "If she doesn't sign, we make it clear she can't manage alone. People believe that kind of thing when someone her age starts acting paranoid." Megan said, "Don't say it like that." "What?" "It's true enough. She forgets things. She gets emotional. And now some retired judge is filling her head with nonsense." Then came the sentence Lily had warned me about. "If Mom won't cooperate, it'll make sure everyone understands she can't manage on her own anymore." The room seemed to shrink. Mark stopped the recording again. I stared at the floor. No mother wants to hear her child planning against her in his own voice. Suspicion is painful. Evidence is different. Evidence has a cruelty suspicion does not. It leaves no soft corner where excuses can hide. Mark removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is important," he said. "Very important. But we have to be careful, especially because Lily recorded it, and she is a minor." "I don't want her hurt," I said. "I know. We will not use this carelessly." "What happens now?" Mark leaned back. "Now we protect you quickly. I'm going to file appropriate notices regarding your property and send letters to any relevant parties. If your son has represented your home as available collateral, those people need to know he has no authority to do so." My stomach tightened. Relevant parties means the investors. Yes, if we can identify them. I thought of Richard Cole, Karen Mills, Vanessa, and Paul Whitman at the restaurant. The way Daniel had spoken in front of them. The way Richard had looked uncomfortable when Eleanor intervened. "I know some names," I said. Mark wrote them down. 2 days later, I learned just how far Daniel's story had traveled. Richard Cole contacted Mark's office. According to Mark, Richard had received a formal notice stating that I had not authorized Daniel to pledge, transfer, encumber, or otherwise use my property in connection with any business dealings. Richard wanted to know whether this was a misunderstanding, because Daniel had repeatedly implied that family-held property would strengthen the investment package for his new project. Family-held property. That was what my home had become in Daniel's mouth. Not my home. Not the place his father died. Not the roof I paid for with years of work. Family-held property. A phrase smooth enough to hide theft inside it. Then Mark told me something else. Daniel was hosting a private investor reception at the Maple Grove Community Club that Friday evening. It was not a gala in the glittering big city sense. It was a polished local business event, the kind with catered appetizers, wine, a small podium, and banners printed with words like growth and legacy. Daniel was expected to present his development plan and answer investor questions. Mark did not tell me to attend. He simply said, "You have a right to be present if your property is being discussed." I laughed once bitterly. Do I want to watch my son lie in public? No, Eleanor said quietly. But maybe it is time he stops lying in rooms where you are absent. That sentence made the decision for me. Friday evening, I put on a dark gray dress, simple black shoes, and Thomas's old wedding ring on a chain beneath my collar. I did not dress to impress anyone. I dressed so I could stand upright. Eleanor arrived at my house at 6. She wore a navy coat and carried herself with that quiet authority that made people lower their voices without knowing why. Mark met us at the community club holding a slim folder and wearing the calm expression of a man prepared for trouble. "Remember," he said before we entered, "we are not here to cause a scene. We are here to observe and correct false statements if necessary." My hands were cold, and if Daniel loses his temper, Mark looked toward the entrance. Then he proves more than we could. Inside the room was warm and bright. Round tables were covered in white cloth. A projector screen displayed Daniel's company logo, Jenkins Property Solutions. Beneath it were the words, "Building Tomorrow with Family Values." Family values. I almost turned around. Then Eleanor's hand touched my elbow lightly. "Breathe." I did. Daniel stood near the front of the room, surrounded by men in blazers and women holding wine glasses. Megan stood beside him, smiling, as if nothing in the world had ever been broken. She saw me first. Her smile disappeared. Then Daniel turned. For one brief moment, I saw panic flash across his face. He recovered quickly, of course. Daniel was good at recovering in public. He excused himself from the conversation and crossed the room toward us, his smile fixed in place. "Mom," he said through his teeth, "what are you doing here?" I looked around the room. I was curious about the family values. His eyes moved to Mark, then Eleanor. "This is inappropriate." Mark extended a hand. "Mark Reynolds. I represent Mrs. Jenkins." Daniel did not shake it. "This is a private event," he said. Mark's tone stayed even. "Then I assume no privately owned property belonging to my client will be referenced." Daniel's face tightened. Before he could respond, Richard Cole approached. His expression was no longer relaxed and polished as it had been at dinner. He looked cautious. "Daniel Richard said perhaps we should clarify things before the presentation begins." Daniel turned toward him. "There's nothing to clarify." Richard looked at me. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm sorry for the awkwardness the other night." I nodded. "Thank you." He shifted uncomfortably. "Your attorney's letter raised concerns." Daniel had indicated that certain family assets would be available to support the project. "My home is not available," I said. The words sounded stronger than I felt. A few people nearby turned slightly. Daniel lowered his voice. "Mom, don't do this." I looked at him. "Do what?" "Create confusion." "There is no confusion," Mark said. "Mrs. Jenkins has not granted Daniel Jenkins authority to use her property as collateral." Karen Mills joined us then, tablet in hand. "Daniel, our due diligence team needs documentation on any pledged assets." "If Mrs. Jenkins is saying she did not consent, that changes the risk profile substantially." Daniel's jaw tightened. "This is a family misunderstanding." Eleanor spoke for the first time. "No, Mr. Jenkins. A misunderstanding is when two people interpret the same facts differently. This appears to be one person representing another person's property without authority." Her voice did not carry loudly, but it cut cleanly through the air. Several conversations around us stopped. Daniel looked at her with open dislike. "You again." "Yes," Eleanor said. "Me again." Megan stepped forward. "This is not the place." I turned to her. "It was the place when he wanted me to sign papers at dinner." Color rose in her cheeks. Daniel's business smile vanished. You are letting these people manipulate you. No, I said. I am letting them protect me. Richard's eyes moved from me to Daniel. Were the documents signed? Daniel hesitated. That hesitation answered more than a confession would have. Karen tapped something into her tablet. Daniel, he forced a laugh. We're finalizing internal family paperwork. No, Mark said. You are not. The room had gone almost completely quiet now. The projector still glowed behind Daniel's name. Building tomorrow with family values. I stared at those words and felt something inside me loosen. For weeks, Daniel had made me feel like truth was the threat. But truth did not create the danger. Truth only turned on the light. Richard's voice hardened. Daniel, did you represent Mrs. Jenkins' property as available collateral without signed authorization? Daniel looked at him, then at the watching room, then finally at me. For a moment, I thought he might admit it. Instead, he chose the mask. My mother has been confused lately, he said loud enough for more people to hear. She's under the influence of people who do not understand our family. There it was, the story. I felt the room shift toward me, curious, uncertain. My knees weakened. Then Eleanor stepped slightly forward. I spent more than 30 years in family court, she said, calm and clear. And I can tell you this, calling a woman confused when she refuses to surrender control of her own property is not evidence of concern. It is often evidence of strategy. Daniel's face went pale with fury. Mark opened his folder. We have documented bank irregularities, disputed authorization forms, written communications, and reason to believe further legal action may be required. Any investor proceeding with claims against Mrs. Jenkins's property after notice does so at significant risk. The words were legal, but their effect was immediate. Richard stepped back from Daniel. Karen closed her tablet. Vanessa Whitman whispered something to her husband, and Paul shook his head. Daniel looked around as if the room had betrayed him. But the room had not betrayed him. It had simply stopped applauding before checking what stood behind the curtain. I looked at my son standing beneath his company logo, his image cracking in front of the very people he had tried so hard to impress. I did not feel triumphant. I felt grief, because the man unraveling before me was still the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged. Still the child whose first word had been mama. Still my son. But he had built his success on a version of family that required my silence. And that night, in a room full of witnesses, my silence finally ended. I never imagined I would sit in a courtroom across from my only son. There are places a mother's mind refuses to picture. A hospital bed, maybe. A funeral home. A police station. A courtroom. We know life can lead families into those rooms, but we tell ourselves our family will be different. We tell ourselves love history and blood will keep certain doors closed. But some doors open anyway. The hearing was scheduled for a gray Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. Mark had filed an emergency request to prevent any transfer lien pledge or legal action involving my home or accounts without my direct consent. He had also requested that any disputed documents be examined and that Daniel's claimed authority over my property be suspended while the matter was reviewed. It sounded so clean when Mark said it. In reality, it felt like walking into a storm with my heart exposed. Eleanor drove me there because she said I should not have to sit alone in the parking lot beforehand. She did not talk much on the way. She simply kept both hands on the wheel and let me breathe through my nerves. I wore a dark blue dress and the same imitation pearls I had worn to that dinner. I almost chose something else, but in the end, I wanted those pearls with me. Thomas had bought them with love, and love, real love, was not something Daniel got to make me ashamed of. Mark met us outside the courtroom. You understand, today may not resolve everything," he said gently. "This is about temporary protection and establishing enough concern for the court to act." I understand. I did not fully, but I understood enough. I understood that if the judge believed Daniel, my life could become something other people discussed over my head. Daniel arrived 5 minutes later with Megan beside him and an attorney I did not recognize. He wore a navy suit, crisp white shirt, and the same composed expression he used in business settings. He did not look at me at first. Megan did, then quickly looked away. Lily was not there. I was grateful and sad at once. When we entered the courtroom, my knees trembled. The room was smaller than I expected, less dramatic than television, with wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and a judge who looked tired before anyone even spoke. Yet to me, it felt enormous. Every sound echoed. Every shuffle of paper seemed important. When my case was called, Mark stood. "Your Honor," he began. "This matter concerns potential financial exploitation of an elderly homeowner by her adult son, including disputed account access, questionable authorization forms, pressure to execute broad power of attorney documents, and possible misrepresentations to third-party investors regarding the use of her home as collateral." Hearing my life summarized like that made my stomach twist. Daniel's attorney rose next. He was smooth, silver-haired, and calm. "Your Honor, this is an unfortunate family misunderstanding that has been inflamed by outsiders. Mr. Jenkins has acted only out of concern for his mother, whose recent behavior has become increasingly erratic. She has been influenced by a retired judge with no formal role in this family, and by an attorney who is escalating matters unnecessarily." Outsiders. There it was again. A word meant to make help sound dangerous. The judge looked over his glasses. "We'll proceed with evidence." Mark presented the bank records first. The repeated small transfers to Jenkins Property Solutions. The authorization form I did not remember signing. The timing, 11 months after Thomas's death, when I was still overwhelmed by grief. Patricia from the bank had provided a statement confirming that I had requested additional security after discovering access I did not recall authorizing. Daniel's attorney argued that the transfers were reimbursements. "For what?" the judge asked. Daniel's attorney shuffled papers. "Administrative support, property-related assistance, document handling." The judge looked at Daniel. "Do you have invoices?" Daniel leaned toward his attorney and whispered. My chest tightened. No invoices were presented. Then Mark moved to the documents Daniel had tried to get me to sign at dinner. He described the broad power of attorney, the property transfer language, the joint account access, and the residential planning provisions. He did not dramatize them. He simply explained what they could have allowed Daniel to do. Daniel's attorney said, "Mrs. Jenkins was not forced to sign anything." Mark responded, "Because a stranger at the next table intervened." The judge looked toward Eleanor. Eleanor sat upright in the back row, hands folded. She was not trying to look powerful. She simply did. The judge asked, "Mrs. Whitaker, you were present at the restaurant." Eleanor stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Your professional background, retired family court judge. 32 years on the bench before retirement." Daniel's attorney shifted slightly. The judge nodded. "You may briefly describe what you observed." Eleanor's voice was steady. "I observed Mr. Jenkins present legal documents to his mother in a public dining setting. I heard him minimize her need to understand the documents imply she was forgetful, insult her character, and pressure her to sign. In my experience, that pattern is concerning. It does not resemble ordinary assistance." Daniel's jaw tightened. His attorney rose. "Your Honor, Mrs. Whitaker is not a neutral witness. She has inserted herself into this family." The judge looked at Eleanor. "Did you know Mrs. Jenkins before that evening?" Eleanor paused. I felt my heart move into my throat. "Many years ago, Mrs. Jenkins helped me during a personal crisis," Eleanor said. "We did not remain in contact. She did not recognize me at the restaurant. My intervention was based on what I witnessed." The judge wrote something down. Then came the recording. Mark explained that the audio had been provided by Lily, a minor, and asked that it be handled sensitively. The judge agreed to hear it with limited discussion of Lily's role. I stared at the table as Daniel's voice filled the courtroom. If she doesn't sign, we make it clear she can't manage alone. I heard Megan's voice faint, but clear enough. Don't say it like that. Then Daniel again. People believe that kind of thing when someone her age starts acting paranoid. A cold silence settled over the room. I did not look at my son. I could not. The judge let the recording play until Daniel's final words came through. If Mom won't cooperate, I'll make sure everyone understands she can't manage on her own anymore. Mark stopped the recording. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then the judge looked at Daniel. Mr. Jenkins, did you say those words? Daniel's face had lost its business polish. Your Honor, that was taken out of context. What context makes that statement appropriate? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. His attorney stepped in quickly. Emotions were high after a family conflict. The judge's expression did not change. That was not my question. I felt Mark's hand rest briefly on the edge of the table near me. Not touching me, just reminding me I was not alone. Then Daniel's attorney called me unstable in softer language. He said I had been grieving for years, that I was lonely, that I had become attached to my house in an unhealthy way, that I was suspicious because I did not understand modern finances, that Eleanor's involvement had caused me to misinterpret Daniel's concern. Every sentence was wrapped in politeness. Every sentence tried to erase me. Finally, Mark asked me to speak. I stood slowly. The courtroom seemed to sway for a moment, but I held the table until it steadied. Mrs. Jenkins, Mark said gently, can you tell the court what you want? Such a simple question. No one had asked me that at the dinner. Daniel had told me what I should do. Megan had told me what would make things easier. Investors had heard what Daniel promised. Bank forms had carried signatures I did not remember making. What did I want? I looked at the judge. I want to live in my own home, I said. My voice trembled, but it did not break. I want to manage my own money. I want time to read anything before I sign it. I want my son to stop speaking for me as if I am already gone. Daniel looked down. I continued. I loved my son through every stage of his life. I worked in a school cafeteria. I sewed at night. My husband worked until his body hurt. We did those things so Daniel could have more choices than we did. But I did not raise him so he could decide. My life stopped belonging to me when I got older. The judge watched me closely. I am not confused, I said. I am heartbroken. There is a difference. The words hung in the room. For the first time that day, I let myself look at Daniel. His face was pale, and I saw anger there, but also something else. Maybe shame, maybe fear, maybe only the shock of realizing I would no longer protect his image by destroying my own. The judge gave his ruling shortly afterward. Temporary protections would be placed on my property and accounts. Daniel was barred from acting on my behalf or representing authority over my home while the disputed documents were investigated. The bank records and signatures would be reviewed further. Any contact regarding financial or legal matters had to go through counsel. It was not the end, but it was a shield. When the hearing adjourned, I sat down because my legs would not hold me anymore. Eleanor came to my side. Mark gathered his papers. Daniel walked past me without speaking. Megan paused near the door. For 1 second, her eyes met mine. I expected coldness. Instead, I saw fear. Not fear of me, fear of what she had allowed. Then she followed Daniel out. I remained in the courtroom a little longer, breathing slowly, one hand wrapped around the pearls at my throat. I had entered that room, afraid the world would believe I was weak. I left knowing strength does not always roar. Sometimes strength is an old woman standing in court and saying, "I am still here." Protection does not feel the way people imagine it will. When the judge placed temporary safeguards around my home and accounts, I thought I would feel relief rushing through me like sunlight. I thought I would walk out of that courthouse lighter, freer, maybe even victorious. Instead, I went home and sat at my kitchen table until the room grew dark. The house was still mine. The bank accounts were safer. Daniel could no longer speak for me legally or financially while the investigation continued. Mark had already sent copies of the court's order to the bank, the county records office, and every investor contact he could identify. On paper, I had won something, but in my heart, something had collapsed. The next several days moved strangely. Mark called often with updates. The bank confirmed additional restrictions. The county recorder's office flagged my property file for attempted unauthorized activity. Daniel's disputed documents were pulled into review. The authorization form, with my supposed signature, was sent for examination, and Mark warned me that the process could take time. Temporary protection is not the end, he reminded me, but it matters. I knew it mattered. Still, every time the phone rang, my body braced for Daniel. He did not call. That silence hurt in a way I was ashamed to admit. After everything, after the dinner, the threats, the bank records, the courtroom, some part of me still waited for my son to say, "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I was wrong." But the apology did not come. What came instead was consequence. Richard Cole withdrew from Daniel's project first. Mark told me this carefully, not as gossip, but because Richard's attorney contacted him to confirm no claim would be made against my property. Karen Mills's group backed away next. Within a week, the project Daniel had been building his image around began to crumble. Then the unpaid contractors from the Dayton development became more aggressive. Liens and claims surfaced. A local business newsletter published a short piece about investor concerns connected to Jenkins Property Solutions. It did not mention me by name, but people in business circles knew enough. Daniel's polished reputation, the one he had treated like something worth more than his own mother's dignity, began cracking in public. I thought I would feel satisfaction. I did not. One afternoon, Eleanor came by with soup and fresh bread from the bakery near her condo. She found me sitting in Thomas's chair, staring at nothing. "You haven't eaten," she said. "I'm not hungry." That was not a question. I almost smiled. She warmed the soup herself, moving through my kitchen as if she had been visiting for years. When she set the bowl in front of me, I noticed she had used the blue ceramic one Thomas liked. I wondered if she chose it by accident or because she saw the way my eyes lingered on it. "I protected my house," I said after a while. "Yes. Then why do I feel like I lost my family?" Eleanor sat across from me. "Because protection and grief can happen at the same time." I looked toward the hallway where Daniel's childhood height marks had once been. "I keep thinking about when he was 7. He had a spelling test, and he was so scared he'd fail. Thomas made flashcards, and I baked cookies, and we practiced for hours. When he came home with a gold star, he ran into my arms like I had won it with him." My voice broke. "How does that child become the man who tries to take your home?" Eleanor's face softened. Slowly. Then all at once, I hated how true that felt. 2 days later, Megan called. Her name appeared on my phone late in the morning. I stared at it until the screen almost went dark. Then I answered. "Rebecca," she said. Her voice sounded different, smaller, less polished. Yes, I know you may not want to speak with me. I said nothing. She inhaled shakily. Could I come by alone? Every instinct in me tightened. Why I need to talk to you about Lily. That name opened the door. Is she all right? She's not all right. None of us are. Megan paused. But she is safe. I took her to my sister's house for a few days. I sat up straighter. You left Daniel temporarily. Does he know where she is? Yes. But he agreed to give her space. I did not trust that word. Agreed. Daniel agreed to things when he thought agreement served him. Still, I told Megan she could come. She arrived an hour later without makeup, or with so little that she looked like another person. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes were swollen. For the first time since I had known her, Megan did not enter my house like she was inspecting it. She stood in the doorway and looked ashamed. May I come in? I moved aside. We sat in the living room, not the kitchen. I needed distance from the table where so many papers had been spread, where Thomas's memory still felt tender. Megan folded her hands in her lap. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. That's good, I replied more sharply than I intended. Because I don't know if I can. She nodded as if she deserved that. I knew Daniel was desperate, she said. I knew the business was in trouble. He told me the Dayton project would recover, that the investors only needed reassurance that your house would eventually be part of his inheritance anyway. My stomach tightened. I told myself he was thinking practically, she continued. I told myself you would still be cared for. That maybe a smaller place really would be easier for you. That Daniel was harsh because he was under pressure. I stared at her. You told yourself many things. Yes, she whispered. I did. Did you know about the bank transfers? She closed her eyes briefly. Not at first. At first, when I found out, Daniel said they were reimbursements. He said you had forgotten approving them. And you believed him. I wanted to. That answer was not noble, but it sounded honest. Megan looked around my living room. Her eyes stopped on the framed photo of Thomas and me from our 30th anniversary. I think part of me envied this house. I frowned. This house, not the house itself. What it meant. You and Thomas built something simple but real. Daniel and I built something that always needed more money to keep looking perfect. Her voice trembled. I should have stopped him at dinner. I should have stopped him before dinner. I knew he wanted you to sign quickly. I knew he wanted the investors to see it happen. I told myself it was just business pressure. But when he said those things to you... She covered her mouth for a moment. I saw Lily's face, and I still stayed quiet. That was the truth between us. Not that Megan had planned every step. Not that she was innocent either. She had stood beside cruelty because cruelty served the life she wanted to maintain. Silence had been her contribution. Why are you here? I asked. She looked at me then. Because Lily asked me why I let her father hurt you. I looked away. She won't speak to Daniel right now, Megan said. She barely speaks to me. She told me she wants to see you, but only if you feel safe. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. I always want to see Lily, I know, but I won't allow her to be used between us anymore. Megan nodded quickly. I understand. No, I said. I need you to hear me. Daniel threatened to keep her from me to control me. You helped him do it. That cannot happen again. I know if Lily comes here, it must be because it is healthy for her, not because anyone is trying to repair appearances. Megan's face crumpled slightly. There may not be appearances left to repair. For the first time, I felt something close to pity for her. Not forgiveness, not trust, but pity. Because Megan had wanted a perfect-looking life, And now she was standing in the living room of the woman she had helped diminish, admitting the image had cost more than she could pay. "Is Daniel being investigated?" she asked quietly. "Mark says there may be further action," I said. "I don't know how far it will go." She nodded, crying silently. I did not comfort her. That may sound cold, but I had spent too many years comforting people who hurt me, so they would not have to sit too long with the weight of what they had done. Megan wiped her face. "Lily would like to come Saturday if that's all right. I can bring her, or my sister can." "Whatever makes you comfortable. Your sister?" I said. She accepted that. At the door, Megan paused. "Rebecca." I waited. "I'm sorry." The words were small. Too small for what had happened, but they were there. "I hear you," I said. Not "I forgive you." Not "it's all right." Only "I hear you." After she left, I stood by the window and watched her car pull away. My house was quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. Something had been exposed. Something ugly, yes, but also something necessary. I still had my home. I still had my voice. And soon, I would have Lily at my table again. But justice, I learned, does not restore everything exactly as it was. Sometimes, justice simply stops the bleeding. Healing is what comes after slowly, if the wound is allowed to close without another hand tearing it open. Daniel came to my house 3 weeks after the hearing. I saw his car before I saw him. It pulled up slowly to the curb, not with the confident swing I had grown used to, but carefully, almost hesitantly, as if even the tires knew the man inside no longer owned the right to enter without consequence. I was in the kitchen peeling potatoes for soup. Lily was not there that day. She had visited twice since Megan took her to stay with her sister, and both visits had been quiet, tender, and careful. We baked cinnamon rolls the first time and said almost nothing about the case. The second time, she sat at my table doing homework while I mended a loose button on her coat. Ordinary things. Healing things. When Daniel stepped out of his car, I set the potato peeler down. He was not wearing a suit. That struck me first. My son, who had once dressed for every conversation like he was about to be photographed, stood on my sidewalk in jeans, a wrinkled gray sweater, and worn sneakers. His hair was uncombed. His shoulders looked lower than I remembered. For a brief, dangerous moment, my heart reached for him before my mind caught up. A mother's love has memory in it, but so does pain. He stood on the porch for nearly a full minute before knocking. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the door, and looked through the small glass pane. His face was pale, older. He saw me watching and did not smile. I opened the door but kept one hand on the frame. "Daniel, Mom." I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the door, and looked through the small glass pane. His face was pale, older. He saw me watching and did not smile. I opened the door but kept one hand on the frame. "Daniel, Mom." That word nearly undid me, not because it was enough. It was not. But because he said it like a man who finally understood there was a chance he might lose the right to say it. "What are you doing here?" I asked. I wanted to talk. "About legal matters." He shook his head quickly. "No, Mark already told my attorney not to let me do that." "Then about what?" He swallowed. "You." I did not move aside immediately. The old Rebecca would have invited him in before asking why. The old Rebecca would have apologized for the cold porch-offered coffee fussed over whether he had eaten. That woman was still inside me, but she no longer opened doors alone. "If you raise your voice, I said you leave." He nodded, If you mention my house, my accounts, or papers you want me to sign, you leave. I won't. If you blame Eleanor, Mark, Lily, Megan, or anyone else for your choices, you leave. His jaw tightened, but he nodded again. I understand. Only then did I step back. He entered slowly, looking around the hallway, as if seeing the house for the first time in years. His eyes paused on the framed photo of Thomas near the stairs. He looked away quickly. We sat in the kitchen. I chose Thomas's chair for myself. Daniel noticed. For a while, neither of us spoke. The pot on the stove ticked softly as it warmed. Rain tapped against the window, gentle and steady. I thought of Eleanor's bus station story, the rain that had carried kindness forward for decades. I wondered what this rain would carry away. Daniel rubbed his hands together. I don't know how to start. The truth is usually a good place. He flinched. Then he nodded. I'm sorry. The words landed between us. I waited. He seemed to expect something to happen. Tears, maybe. Relief. My hand reaching across the table. A mother's forgiveness arriving quickly enough to save him from sitting too long in his own shame. When I said nothing, his face tightened. I said, I'm sorry, Mom. I heard you. He looked down. I made mistakes. No, I said quietly. His eyes lifted. Mistakes are forgetting milk at the store. Mistakes are missing an appointment. What you did was not a mistake. Color rose in his face. I know it was wrong. Wrong is still too small. He leaned back as if the words had pushed him. What do you want me to say? I want you to stop trying to find the sentence that makes this easier for you. His mouth opened, then closed. I surprised myself with how calm I sounded. Inside, everything hurt. But calm is not the absence of pain. Sometimes calm is pain that has learned where to stand. Daniel stared at the table. The business was falling apart. I know. I had loans, contractor claims, investors asking questions. Megan was scared. I was scared. I said nothing. At first, I told myself I was just borrowing small amounts, reimbursements. I thought I'd put it back before you noticed. And the signature? His face crumpled for half a second before he hit it. I convinced myself you had agreed in spirit. After Dad died, you let me handle so much. You trusted me. Yes, I said. I did. The shame in his eyes deepened. I hated that house for a long time, he whispered. I looked around my kitchen, the chipped mug by the sink, the old curtains, the table where I had packed his school lunches, signed permission slips, counted bills, and cried after Thomas died. You hated my home. I hated what it reminded me of. Us. He swallowed. Being poor. The word came out like something rotten pulled from deep underground. We were not rich, I said. But you were loved. I know that now. No, I said. You knew it then. You were just ashamed of what love looked like when it didn't come wrapped in money. He covered his face with one hand. The rain continued against the window. When I got older, he said, voice rough, I started noticing how other people lived. Their parents had lake houses. Their mothers wore real jewelry. Their fathers played golf with partners and new investors. I hated when people asked what Dad did. I hated saying you worked in a school cafeteria. The words hurt, but they no longer surprised me. I packed children's lunches, I said. I made sure little ones who forgot lunch money still ate. Your father lifted boxes until his back gave out. There was nothing shameful in our work. I know. You did not know it when you needed my money. He looked at me, then eyes wet. I did not look away. I wanted to become someone important, he said. And every time I came here, I felt like this house pulled me back into being that kid who wore discount shoes and hoped no one noticed. You blamed the house for your shame. Yes, you blamed me. His voice broke. Yes, there it was. No polished defense, no legal language, no family housekeeping, just the ugly root. I breathed through the pain of it. Daniel leaned forward. I am sorry. For the dinner, for the papers, for the accounts, for threatening you with Lily, for all of it, and for trying to make people think I was losing my mind. He closed his eyes. Yes. Say it. He opened them. I waited. He looked like he might argue. Then something in him seemed to give way. I tried to make people think you were losing your mind so I could get control, he said. My hands trembled under the table, but I kept my voice steady. Thank you for telling the truth. A tear slid down his face. Can you forgive me? He asked. The question was honest, but it was too hungry. It wanted more than I could give. I don't know, I said. His face fell. I can pray for your healing, I continued. I can hope you become a better man. I can remember the boy I loved while still protecting myself from the man who hurt me. But I will not confuse forgiveness with surrender. He wiped his face. What does that mean? It means you will not have access to my money, my accounts, my home, or my legal decisions. Ever. He nodded slowly. It means you will not use Lily to punish me, Megan yourself, or anyone else. I won't. It means any relationship we have from now on must be respectful. If you insult me, pressure me, or twist concern into control, the conversation ends. His mouth trembled. And if I do all that, then perhaps one day we can share a meal without fear. A sad little laugh escaped him. That's all. That is not small, Daniel. He looked around the kitchen again. This time, I think he saw more than old furniture. He saw history, labor. Love he had treated like embarrassment because it did not shine brightly enough for strangers. When he stood to leave, I did not hug him. I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. But wanting and wisdom are not the same thing. At the door, he turned back. Mom. Yes, I miss Dad. My throat tightened. So do I. He would be ashamed of me. I looked at my son, really looked at him. Yes. But he would also want you to become more than the worst thing you have done. Daniel began to cry, then silently with one hand over his mouth, like a child trying not to make noise. I did not comfort him, but I did not close the door in his face either. After he left, I stood on the porch and watched his car disappear into the rain. I felt no victory, no easy peace, only the heavy, honest ache of a boundary finally drawn. Love had brought Daniel into my life. Truth had brought me back to myself. And this time, I chose not to abandon either one. The dinner that changed everything did not happen in a restaurant. There were no white tablecloths, no polished wine glasses, no business investors watching from across the table, no leather folder waiting beside anyone's plate, no yellow tabs, no pen placed near my hand like a command. It happened in my kitchen on a Saturday evening, with rain tapping lightly against the windows and the smell of roasted chicken filling the house. I had spent all afternoon cooking, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because cooking had always been the language my hands spoke best. Chicken with rosemary and lemon, mashed potatoes with real butter, green beans with toasted almonds because Lily liked them that way. a small apple pie cooling on the counter because Thomas used to say a house smelled most like home when there was cinnamon in it. Eleanor arrived first, carrying a bouquet of yellow tulips and a loaf of bread from the bakery near her condo. "I was told never to arrive empty-handed," she said. "By whom?" "A woman at a bus station many years ago." I laughed, and for once the laugh did not feel like it had to climb over grief to get out. Eleanor placed the tulips in the old blue vase Thomas had bought at a yard sale. Then she stood in my kitchen, looking at the table I had set with mismatched plates, cloth napkins, and the best water glasses I owned. "It's beautiful," she said. I looked at the table. "It's simple. Those are not opposites." A few minutes later, Lily arrived with Megan's sister, who waited in the car to give her privacy. Lily came through the door carefully at first, as if afraid the house might still be carrying too much pain. Then she saw me and ran into my arms. "Grandma." I held her tightly. "My sweet girl." She smelled like vanilla shampoo and cold air. She was thinner than before, or maybe she only seemed that way because worry had drawn something from her face. But when she looked around the kitchen, her shoulders lowered. "It smells the same," she whispered. "What does your house?" I smiled. "I hope that's good." "It's the best." She helped me set out the silverware, even though I had already done it twice. Eleanor watched us without interrupting, and I could feel the warmth of her presence in the room, steady and quiet. She had become more than the stranger who stood up at the restaurant. She had become proof that life sometimes sends back the kindness you once gave away and forgot. Megan came next. She knocked, though she had been inside my house dozens of times before. When I opened the door, she stood there in a plain sweater holding a covered dish. "I made sweet potatoes," she said. "Lily said you used to make them with marshmallows, but I didn't know if that was too much." "It is exactly enough," I said. Her eyes filled, but she blinked quickly and nodded. She did not sweep in. She did not comment on the curtains or the old floorboards. She did not try to manage the evening. She asked where she could put the dish, then went to the sink and washed her hands. A small thing. But sometimes humility enters a room quietly. Daniel was the last to arrive. I heard his car outside and felt every muscle in my body tighten. Lily looked at me from across the kitchen. Megan went still near the counter. Eleanor did not move, but I saw her eyes turn toward the door. This dinner had rules. No discussion of money, no discussion of legal matters, no pressure, no insults, no rewriting what happened. If anyone broke those rules, the dinner ended. Daniel had agreed through Mark first, then to me directly in writing. I had needed the written agreement not because I wanted to be cold, but because trust once broken must not be demanded back like unpaid debt. Daniel knocked. When I opened the door, he stood holding a small potted basil plant. "I didn't know what to bring," he said. For a moment, I saw the boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard, proud as if he had found gold. I stepped aside. "You can put it on the windowsill." He entered quietly. Lily did not run to him. Megan did not move toward him. Eleanor gave him a polite nod, nothing more. Daniel accepted all of it. That mattered. He did not ask for warmth he had not yet earned. During dinner, conversation came slowly at first. Eleanor told Lily about studying law at night while working days. Lily asked questions curious despite herself. Megan talked about staying with her sister and how she had started seeing a counselor. Daniel listened more than he spoke. That was new. My son had spent years filling rooms with his voice, so no one would notice what was missing underneath. That evening, he let silence exist without trying to conquer it. At one point, Lily asked, "Grandma, did Grandpa really burn toast every time he tried to cook?" I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. Every single time. Daniel looked down at his plate. Then he said softly, "He used to tell me burnt toast built character." I looked at him. A small, sad smile crossed his face. "I forgot that." "No," I said gently. "You buried it." The table went quiet. Daniel nodded. "Yes, I did." He did not defend himself. He did not explain. He simply accepted the sentence and let it stand. That was the first time I felt the tiniest thread of hope. Not because everything was fixed. It was not. The investigation was still moving. Consequences still existed. My boundaries remained firmly in place. But healing does not always begin with a grand apology. Sometimes it begins when a person finally stops arguing with the truth. After dinner, Lily helped me clear the plates. Megan washed. Daniel dried. Eleanor sat at the table with her tea, smiling to herself like a woman watching a garden she had not planted begin to bloom. When I brought out the apple pie, Daniel looked at it for a long time. "Dad's favorite," he said. "Yes, I don't deserve to eat it." "No," I said, cutting the first slice. "Dessert is not forgiveness. It's dessert." Lily laughed. Then Megan laughed. Then after a moment, Daniel did too. Not loudly, not easily, but honestly. Later, after Megan and Daniel left separately and Lily hugged me 3 times before going with her Aunt Eleanor, stayed to help me wipe the table. The house settled around us, warm and tired. "You did well tonight," she said. "I don't know what happens next. No one ever really does." I looked at the empty chairs. Thomas's chair, Lily's chair, Daniel's chair pushed in neatly for once. The first dinner made me feel like I had no place. I said, "This one reminded me I still have a table." Eleanor smiled. "And a voice." "Yes," I said, "and a voice." That night, after everyone left, I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the doorway for a long time. The house was quiet, but it was not lonely in the old way. It held grief, yes, but it also held truth. It held boundaries. It held the possibility that love could return only if it learned respect first. I thought of Thomas and whispered, "I'm still here." Then I touched the basil plant Daniel had brought and placed it closer to the window. Not because I trusted him fully, not because the past had vanished, but because some things with light time and care may still grow. Lessons and message. What happened to me taught me something I wish no mother ever had to learn this way. Love without boundaries can become a doorway for harm. We often tell parents, especially mothers, to sacrifice endlessly, forgive quickly, and stay quiet for the sake of family. But family should never require you to surrender your dignity, your home, your savings, or your voice. An aging parent is not a burden simply because they need respect, patience, or protection. A mother's sacrifices are not something her children should feel ashamed of. Work done with love. Whether in a cafeteria, a warehouse, a kitchen, or a sewing room, carries honor. If a child grows up and becomes embarrassed by the very hands that fed them, the shame belongs to the child, not the parent. This story is also a reminder that financial abuse does not always look like a stranger stealing from a bank account. Sometimes it comes wrapped in words like help, family, concern, and practicality. Sometimes the person applying pressure is someone you raised, trusted, and loved. That is why asking questions matters. Reading before signing matters. Having your own lawyer matters. And believing your discomfort matters. Forgiveness. If it comes, does not mean forgetting. It does not mean handing control back to someone who has already abused it. Real healing requires truth, accountability, and boundaries strong enough to protect the wounded person. And finally, never underestimate the power of one small act of kindness. Years before Eleanor saved me at that restaurant, I had helped a frightened young woman at a bus station and forgotten about it. She never forgot. Kindness is never wasted. Sometimes it travels farther than we can see and returns when we need it most. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Rebecca was right to set firm boundaries with Daniel? Have you ever seen someone use family love as a weapon? Please like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs the reminder that respect should never disappear with age. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Your voice matters here.